everyone. This second early morning trip, but from Winston, so it's not normal I do that, but I had to do it 2 mornings in a row. So thank you all. I'd like to call the meeting the Thursday, February 23rd, 9 a.m. meeting of the Supplemental Retirement Board of Trustees to order. Thank you all for being here, both in person and virtually. I'd like to start by asking everybody to stand and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance. And following Chevelle leading us in our salute to North Carolina flag. It's right there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the old North State love, loyalty, and faith. As we call the meeting to order, there'll be a public comment section for any organization or individuals who'd like to address the board later in the agenda. Continuing with our department's initiative to increase governmental transparency, the department establishes policy to record audio and video of the official public meetings like this one and make these available to the public. Just for your information, if you're joining us virtually, please mute your cell phone and please understand that any communication on a personal device regarding the issues that are before us in this meeting while the meeting is going on to be deemed to be public record. Those are our housekeeping rules. Without objection, as we ask for votes for efficiency purposes, anybody who makes a motion or a second to a motion will be considered a yes vote. And as a reminder, as I've already reminded you, to please mute your cell phones. With that, I'll ask the secretary to call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Here.
Wyndon Hibbler.
Present.
Steve Bain.
Here.
Chevelle Thomas.
Present.
Lorraine Johnson.
Here.
James Lumsden.
Here.
Melinda Barron.
Here.
Bob Shea.
Here.
And Nils Roseland.
Online and here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's all congratulate Nels as being not only nominated, but now duly appointed as the Controller of North Carolina. Nels, congratulations.
Here, here.
Thank you all.
It just didn't jump up on the table by itself, did it, Nels?
No,
So,
sir.
we're glad you got through that. With that, we have our Ethics Act. Members, you've seen our board book and our materials. Does anyone have a conflict or an appearance of conflict regarding any matters before us? Hearing none, Reed would want me to remind you that if a conflict should arise during our meeting, please bring it to the chair's attention. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 1st of last year. So moved. Thank you. Motion second. Any further discussion regarding approval of meeting minutes? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Wyndon Hibbler. Aye. Nils Roseland.
Aye.
Bob Shea.
Aye.
Melinda Barron.
Aye.
Good. And like motion for the January 11th meeting minutes. So moved. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Chevelle Thomas.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Wyndon Hibbler. Aye. Nils Roseland.
Aye.
And Bob Shea.
Aye. Thank you all. I'm sure you did not drive as fast as this meeting is going this morning. So. Lastly, ratification. You're being ratified this morning, Chevelle. Ratification, the board requires that 3 of our 4 board members to serve on the audit subcommittee. As you remember, Michael Lewis served on the subcommittee, but his term expired last year. Steve, Melinda, and Chevelle And B, Shabella offered to fill the open position as board chair. I appointed her prior to the audit subcommittee in a meeting last week. The board charter requires the chair to appoint the subcommittee members subject to ratification of the entire board. So do I have a motion to ratify Shabella Thomas's appointment to the audit subcommittee?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Motion second being made. All those,
Bob on the second.
yes, thank you. And without objection, any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shabella Thomas.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Melinda Barron.
Aye.
Nels Roseland.
Aye.
And Wyndon Hibbler. Aye.
All right. Now we're on to administrative matters. Jeff?
Yep, thank you. Just wanted to give you guys a brief update. As you all know from our last interim meeting, we have chosen a new auditor, UHY. We held our audit kickoff meeting last week on February the 15th. So the audit is now underway and everything, we're getting everything in place with our partners so that the auditors have access to that. So everything has gotten off to a smooth start. Wanted to also let you know that we still have one remaining account balance in the 403B plan. We are working with our unclaimed property division on how those assets should be transferred over to them. It's taken us a little bit of time to kind of nail down whether those should transfer over in kind or if they can be liquidated and transferred in cash. There's been a little bit of back and forth on that, but once we get that nailed down, we'll be able to close out that remaining balance. But I wanted to let you know that that's still, as of today, is still there. Did want to update you all as well on something that was signed into law at the end of last year. President Biden signed into law Secure 2.0. Into that, we did include in the materials a chart in which kind of outlines all of the provisions that may have an effect on our plans. That chart was dutifully put together by Reed, and thank you for that, Reed. So you'll see that there's a number of items that will require action by us in 2023. There are other items that have a high priority this year, and then some that just have possible action in future years. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of these that we're going to be focusing on here near term that have an impact to the plans, and then certainly we'll see if you guys have any questions. But the first one is around eligibility. There's been increased coverage for long-term part-time employees. So starting in 2024, if a part-time employee has had 3 years in a row in which they've had 500 hours of service, they become eligible for the plans. Starting in 2025, they're only going to be required to have 2 years of service with 500 hours or more to be eligible for the plans. So we'll be working with our partners at Empower as well as our employers to get that into effect. The next one I wanted to touch base on was the Roth catch-up contributions. So basically going forward, the government is asking that all of the catch-up contributions are made as a Roth contribution, with the exception for those people who earn $145,000 or less. They will still have the option to make their catch-up contributions on a pre-tax basis. In terms of distributions, they've raised the involuntary distribution cap. That was set at that was set at $5,000. So before, anyone that had a balance between $1,000 and $5,000 could be forced out of the plan if they were terminated. They've raised that cap from $5,000 to $7,000. And that starts in 2024. They've also increased the age for the required minimum distributions. This year, that age goes up from age 72 to age 73, and that will further increase to age 75 starting in year 2033. One item that impacts our governmental 457 plan is the first day of the rule month has been eliminated. Currently, an individual could only make a deferral election the first of the month. They have eliminated that rule to allow for those elections to be made at any time. And then the last thing that I'll cover is they've also created a new distribution type around a disaster relief, where an individual can take out up to a maximum of $22,000 without having the 10% excise penalty, and that will be included in the individual's income over a period of 3 years. There's several others that we're going to be keeping our eyes on and focused on over the year as we work forward. There's some of these that are optional that we do not have to adopt, and certainly if we look to adopt some of these optional items, we'll bring those before the board. So let me kind of pause there and see if there's any questions at this point around Security 2.0 or any of the few items that I've mentioned.
Questions? Which one of them give you what didn't happen? That's probably a long list. What things did not pass? But which of these operationally, which two give you the most? Which two do you think is going to be the best for our members, and which two do you think are going to be toughest to operationalize?
Well, and then they can kind of be one and the same. So I think probably the first one I mentioned, the eligibility for part-time, long-time, part-time employees. That's going to be certainly great to bring other members into the plan. But certainly it's going to require all of the employers to be able to track that if they're not already. And we've been encouraging them when this was brought out, but them being able to track that and get that right in terms of their records.
And elders and teasers you're answering that based on both those plans.
Yes.
So how will the match work for part-time employees?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that.
The match is not required. It's option. The match would be optional.
So not to match a part-time employee would not be discriminating against them.
That's correct.
In relation to matching the full. Okay, good. All right. Other questions?
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes, sir.
this is Nels. Along that same line of questioning, a lot of temp employees are paid hourly through a temp agency called Temp Solutions in state government. Would this expand the eligibility to that very broad group?
Great question.
Yeah.
That is a good question. Something we have to look into. It probably depends who their employer is. If Temp Solutions is a separate legal entity, probably Temp Solutions fall under their compliance, just like it would if there were you were using another outside contract employee agency. But that would be something we'll have to look at.
And it may also depend on how long they've been in that temporary role. I know a few years back, the government was looking at that as a way to force employers to provide benefits to folks who were kept on in the temporary role for a period over 2 years.
Right.
You try to try to encourage people to bring them on full time.
Looking at that, if you will, my hunch is that Temp Solution is its own separate entity. We have people in this building that are, quote, work for Temp Solutions right today. And so getting I as well as Nels and OSHR and answer to that would be helpful. Thank you, Nels.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it? The article I brought you from P&I, does any of that pertain to what you just did?
It does. It so basically that article was talking about Secure Act 2.0.
But didn't it also say that there's some things they were expecting out of 2.0 that would have made the 403 more appetizing, but that didn't cross the finish line?
So there were some things like they were
Trying to confirm the decision the board made to do what we did on 403.
Yeah, so they were I think hoping that CITs would be made available to 403Bs as an investment option. That was not part of that, so 403Bs still could not invest in CITs, and there were several other things that they were hoping to make the 403B, I guess, more attractive that did not come about. I do not know.
So there's nothing they did do that, everything they didn't do, it confirms our decision to do what we did.
Certainly.
Okay, that's all. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Thank you. We'll now turn it over to legal matters for Reed.
The first item is the contract for benchmarking services. As part of your oversight, as you probably know, the board retains a vendor every other year to do a benchmarking study of supplemental retirement plans, investments. Our last report was in 2021. We have posted on our website, actually under the board's page on the website. The vendor drafts the report and then presents the findings to the board either third quarter or fourth quarter. Staff also uses the report in educational materials. In addition, since at least 2014, CEM benchmarking has conducted a similar investment benchmarking study for the retirement systems investments and pension administration for pension administration analysis for retirement systems division. And we in SRP have used CEM benchmarking since at least 2013. The contract this year is for the retirement systems and for SRP. We do that every other year. So we did it 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, and this year 23. Retirement systems does it every year. Pension administration is essentially in the even years with retirement systems. We're in the odd years with retirement systems. So staff is proposing retaining CEM benchmarking again for 2023, a joint contract with retirement systems. The services would be substantially similar to what we received in 2021 with the benchmarking report, approximately the same cost, performance, and other benchmarking analysis as 2 years ago. We also have the opportunity to customize our peer group, work with CEM benchmarking to customize our peer group. CEM would present probably in the third quarter, but either third or fourth quarter to the board. CEM also provides an online tool for staff to do some custom benchmarking. The proposed fee this year is $33,000, up from $30,000 2 years ago. If we elect to have CEM present in person versus online, the fee would increase by $500 to $33,500. The vendor selection policy requires a written recommendation from staff. That's in your materials. And it also requires, the policy also requires the approval of the board. Are there any questions about the proposed contract with CEM?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, having been around it longer than anybody else. I think it might be, CEM has done a phenomenal job in improving our systems and our thinking on how to run our business. It might be helpful for our newer board members who haven't seen where we started and where we've come to possibly have access to the previous reports so they can get their background information up to date prior to meeting with CEM at the next board meeting.
We can do that. We can, the 21 report is on the website, but we have the reports going back. You can get an idea. It's an every 5 year, so that the report will be on the 5 years through 2021, I believe it is. And so it's really the previous 5 years. So it goes back to 2013. So I guess it would be 5 years through the end of 2012. So yes, we can get that to you before the third quarter meeting.
Thank you.
And we're thankful for your institutional knowledge, so just put that on the record, so.
Being the old guy around helps sometimes.
You need to ask for call for motion on this now, or? Is that?
Yes, sir. We need that.
I would entertain a motion to accept Reed's recommendation regarding the CEM benchmarking contract.
Second.
Motion second, thank you, Lorraine. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Linda Barron.
Aye.
Bob Shay.
Aye.
Nils Roseland.
Aye.
Wyndon Hitler. Aye. Steve Bean.
Aye. Thank you. Next to revisions to governance policies.
Staff regularly
And
review.
let me, before you get off CEM, it gives me great pride when I go out and talk about the CEM benchmarking, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about the board's role in keeping these expenses down. People don't know you're here, don't know we're sitting here right now. They just know they have a 401 and a 457 plan. So I use this CEM benchmarking as a way to say that none of this jumps up on the table by itself. It's a board that makes these decisions over long periods of time. They result in staff to put this plan in the efficient mode that it's in. So, and I suggest that when you're out talking to people about these plans, that you also take that opportunity to stand on the shoulders of this report and the other board members, both present and previous. So, thank you. Sorry.
As you know, staff regularly reviews SRB's policies. That includes the internal policies, ones that you don't see their just internal functioning at the department, but also those policies that you've adopted as a board. In August, you looked at proposed revisions and approved revisions to the policies for participants and employers. Recently, our staff reviewed the policies that are grouped under governance policies. We put the charter under that. That's the way they're categorized on your page on ncretirement.com, by ncretirement.com. So there's the charter, vendor selection policy, policy and procedures for investment transactions and investment manager selection, investment policy statement, proxy voting guidelines, and the placement agent, political contribution, and connection disclosure. Your meeting materials have some proposed revisions to the charter, vendor selection policy, and the manager selection policy. The changes to the charter include several clarifications to reflect current practice and the removal of some outdated statutory language regarding board members' terms. The changes to the vendor selection policy include clarifications of the department's role in contract negotiations and your role as a board in contract renewals and approving contract renewals and contract extensions. Changes to the manager selection policy, including some updates to the contracting selection section to bring it in line with current practice, as well as several clarifications, minor edits. And then we've removed references to the NC 403B program, all those policies. At this time, staff's not proposing any changes to the proxy voting guidelines, the placement agent, political contribution, and connection disclosure policy. We do have some proposed changes. We'll bring this at a later meeting. And just as a reminder, the investment policy statement is on its own cycle because Talent helps with, is part of the review of that. And you review that at your fourth quarter meeting and approved changes. So staff recommends the adoption of the revised governance policies in your meeting materials, but I'll pause if there are any comments or questions.
We will ask for a motion second, then we'll go into discussion to see if anybody has anything. And Reed, if you want to take an opportunity, I presume Laura Rowe is listening in. You want to take an opportunity, just thank, this just didn't jump up on the table by itself too. So is there anybody that's assisted you in getting this to this point?
Well, Jeff, Alan, staff, Laura, and staff looks at
Okay.
that.
And it was pointed out this morning, there are a few things that need to be fixed within that. So I don't know if we have to accept a contingent upon those changes or how we need to do that.
We can definitely do that. Have that discussion.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to, and then we'll get a second, then see if there's any discussion to accept staff's recommendation regarding these updates.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob.
Second.
Thank you. And motion second being made. Any discussion? Yes.
I asked Reed one question that there seems to be a conflict in here. And Melinda, not that you're the senior guy or the table or anything, but under the term section B, it says under no, shall not serve any of the longer of 8 consecutive years. And because of their not being reappointed someone, you're on year 11. So that's a pretty substantial variance from where we should be. And my question is, should we acknowledge that? Should we change that? Or because we're obviously in violation of the rule. So I just happened to read it and saw the questions. I just want to raise it up. And we love having you, Melinda. But I think we need to either fix the rule or fix the policy or do something.
Absolutely. And on a regular basis, I keep wondering when the Senate Pro Tem, Senator Berger, is going to come up with a replacement. And the treasurer asked me to continue serving until that happens. 4 years is 4 years, that's for sure.
All right. So we'll address how we feel about you in a moment. But to Steve's point, we don't, Nels can confirm this. We don't control what the Senate does, right? Controller Nels.
That is correct.
So Reed, how do you recommend that we close this gap?
Well, there are 2 or 3 things maybe the board could do. We could acknowledge the approach that we take. We could acknowledge that, document that in the board's charter or the minutes or resolution. Because the approach we take is there's this tension between continuity. You want to hold over, you don't want empty spots on boards, and that's recognized not just with statute here, but a state statute more generally. You also have the tension that there are clearly term limits in the statute, and we're kind of balancing that, and you get and then as we know, the organization that ultimately can resolve this is not in the room. And so I think we can acknowledge that our approach in minutes, the resolution, the charter, some combination, also maybe a direction to the staff to reach out to the Senate Pro Tem's office again. We've not that we haven't done that, but just to do that again. So there's some options, and I'm certainly open to whatever other ideas.
Steve, you have some thoughts on how to close it?
I don't know. I mean, other than making a change to do away with it, the 8 consecutive years.
And that's another, I mean, there could be, the board could say, we support amending the statute or proposing an amendment to the statute. Because we're incorporating into your charter, really just what's in the statute.
So tell me the functionality of getting rid of the 8 consecutive years in your mind.
I mean, I don't think that's a good idea to get rid of it, personally. I don't think you want to have people serve 10 or 20 years, so to speak. I think there should be a limit. But in this case, it's just because the Speaker Pro Tem has chosen to not appoint that we're in this position. But I think when you're 3 years over the limit, that we need to, I don't know the answer, but we need to acknowledge it and at least document it. We tried.
Okay.
I appreciate you bringing this up because I have every year and the treasurer can confirm that. But I continue to serve until somebody can take this chair, and I hope that I can continue to at least provide institutional knowledge to the board. So
Let me see how this feels to you that we've been asked by staff to approve this. We have a motion, a second on the floor. Now we're in discussion, which we're going to discuss for as long as you like. I will send a letter to the appointments person in the Senate, in the President Pro Tem's office, telling them that they need to start working on filling this position. And then at least we have that documentation that we've made some effort to apply by the rules that you're asking us to pass.
Is there a way to, I mean, can we, as a board, at least make a resolution stating that as far as we're concerned, I mean, I don't know how you word, that we're concerned and it needs to happen. Can we do some kind of formal resolution to take to them also, which isn't going to have any force of law or anything else, but just to, from the entire board to say,
I can send
this
this letter
needs to
from
be
the entire
fixed.
board.
Exactly. That would be great.
Okay.
I mean, to me, I don't know about the rest of you.
Along that
Have you said-
line,
Previously?
Let's take one at a time.
Mr. Treasurer, whenever,
Yes.
I,
I'll get right back to it. Yes, you got the floor.
thank you. Maybe we just add a sentence, should an external appointing authority not make an appointment, the board shall make periodic good faith efforts to remind the appointing authorities on the appointment need. And if we capture it in the minutes as a separate thing, or this other letter that was discussed, I believe by Lorraine, those are good faith efforts.
Okay. Thank you, Nels. All right. Bob.
Yeah, whatever you think would be the most effective, coming from you or coming from the board.
I sit on 20 boards and I think I chair 10 of them. And so I'm in constant contact with this appointments person on a lot of different topics. And I'm constantly bringing it up. And but I will say that with all the drama that exists in Raleigh, however it relates to this rule, having Melinda on this board is not the biggest thing going on. But it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be addressed. So I will, I guess what I'm saying is my comfort level with her, her participation, the value she brings to the board, all that withstanding, I need to double my efforts in relation to your question. And as things get hotter and hotter in different other aspects of this job, sometimes that doesn't happen because of my appreciation for her and her participation and the value she brings. think it's a good point. How would you suggest that we can get this vote done, given what Nels just suggested?
I think we can document in the minutes. I can bring something back next quarter for something similar for the charter, to put that in there. So you have that ongoing. And then this letter from you, from the board, up to the Senate Pro Tem's
Okay.
office.
Is that what people prefer?
That's fine.
Okay, so let's, I presume let's withdraw the motion that's on the table and then come back with a substitute motion to approve the vendor selection and policies and procedures for investment manager selection. Or do you want to bring it all back at once?
We can do those two, and I'll just bring
Okay, good.
So we're not going to vote on any of the three, or are you just going to withdraw the board charter?
I believe just the board charter.
Yeah, okay. We won't kill any more trees.
No,
We won't killing trees.
Commissioner, we had a discussion about this earlier this week, and there are additional statutes that we don't have listed here that may apply. So that
Yes, we had, there's at least one
that may actually help with the issue.
incorporate in there as well and say that this further supports the approach.
There's another statute that possibly further supports what we've been doing,
Yes.
or what we are going to be doing.
It's definitely what we would point to. I mean, it's a little more general. It supports the idea of staying on until it's filled.
Okay.
And I'll incorporate that.
Good. So who made the motion?
And Melinda seconded.
You withdraw your motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right, okay. I'll entertain a motion, Bob, to take staff's recommendation regarding vendor selection policy procedures for investment transactions and investment manager selection.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you very much. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shabella Thomas. Wyndham Hibbler.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye. Aye.
Melinda Barron.
Aye.
Nels Roseland.
Aye.
And Steve Bain.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. We're now to amendment the plan documents for the 401K.
Just briefly, as you'll recall at the last meeting, revisions to 401K 457 allow the opportunity for people who succeed to account ownership as a beneficiary to in turn name a beneficiary. In other words, changes allow beneficiaries to name their own beneficiaries. The amendment in your materials was inadvertently omitted. We have received word yesterday that Empower has implemented this change, but would request your approval of this final amendment.
All right. Motion to take staff's recommendation.
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shabella Thomas.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Wyndham Hibbler. Nels Roseland.
Aye.
Bob Shay.
Aye.
Thank you. And Nels is, I just asked this out loud, Nels is going to be able to continue with us? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. So, I was concerned about that in a very positive way, but I'm very happy to hear that. Good. All right. And we're now to Michael and Matt from Empower. Welcome.
Morning. All right, it's great to be here in person today. All right, for the update today, we'd like to highlight a few things in our fourth quarter report, the key metrics. And then also provide an update on the migration from the Heritage Prudential record keeping platform over to the Empower record keeping platform. So first and foremost, in terms of the overall health of the plans, I want to hit on a few key metrics. Progress continues to be very nice. If you go to slide 4 of our report, in terms of the average participant balance come down slightly with the market volatility, but the active participation rate remains strong above 35%, and the active average employee deferral continues to set all-time records. Matter of fact, we just produced the January executive summary report, and we cracked $250 as the average deferral for the first time ever. So another all-time record there. Aside from Melinda, you have me by 1 year on tenure. I've been working on these plans since 2013 when I first started working on these plans. The average monthly deferral rate was about $150 per month. So tremendous progress made over the last 10 years. On slide 5, we also continued to grow and exceed all-time highs with the unique participants with a balance. And then enrollment activity continues to be setting all-time records as well. I know I don't want to steal Matt's thunder, but we set an all-time record with enrollments last year where we cracked 26,000 for the first time. Goalmaker participation rate remains strong, and then the number of new loans remains consistent with the historical trend line. On slide 6, you can see that we're greatly exceeding both the contractual goals that we have in place and then also the stretch goals that we've put in place. And then last year, in terms of employer activity, we had 27 new employer adoptions last year of either the 401k or the 457 plan. As Jeff mentioned earlier, we embarked on the 403B discontinuance project. And then we continued to have 49 employers either add, adopt, or change their employer contribution program. So despite some of the economic headwinds that are out there, and something that the treasurer's had us monitor, we have yet to have one of those employers that offers some type of employer contribution reduce or eliminate that. So that's something that we're watching for, and we'll share that with the board should that occur. I think one of the things that we take great pride on each and every day is partnering with your staff on all the work that we put forth every year on the targeted communication strategy. And the metrics that we're able to come here and proudly share is all the results of all of that work with staff to really come up with those targeted communications to help participants take that next best step on their retirement journey. Any questions there before I give a migration update? All right. So in terms of the migration, a great deal of planning and analysis continues to be done as we prepare for that. As I shared last quarter, that migration is going to take place in the first quarter of next year. I don't know the exact date yet, but it's likely going to be either the first week of February or the first week of March. So, with the shift, yeah, Patty, I don't have any slides on this. With the shift to Empower's record keeping platform, there's a few key things I just want to highlight in terms of how we're thinking about the overall project management. First and foremost, payroll. So, we receive today over 30,000 payrolls a year from all of the different sub-plans. The flexibility of how we receive those payrolls, that's not going to change. What's going to change, though, is the process for how those payrolls get loaded and validated. So as you can imagine, we're going to leverage a lot of the learnings from the 403B project in terms of how we have to interact with the sub-plans, train the sub-plans on just what that process is going to look like when they migrate to Empower's platform to ensure continuity of that payroll loading process. In addition, the other big challenge with sub-plans is going to be what we're calling the user provisioning process. So today, as you imagine, we have over 1,000 sub-plans. they use what we call our plan sponsor website. And that allows them to load payrolls, run reports, see what kind of participant activity is going on, etc. So as part of this migration, they're going to evolve and start using Empower's version of Plan Sponsor Center. As part of that project, we want to make sure from a best practices perspective that we're reaching out to all of the subplans and their authorized signer that we have for each subplan to just validate the user security, validate who in their offices should have access, if any of those accesses, the security controls need to change, and all of that. So that's going to be another, big outreach that we're going to do with all of the subplans to make sure that we're ready to go when that process changes. In addition, we had a great meeting with staff yesterday to discuss some of these things. In terms of our overall contract, that contract remains in place. All of the terms that are part of that contract remain in place. However, we're going to work on an amendment to just document some of the operational and procedural changes as part of the move from Prudential to Empower. So probably about 9 months before the migration date, we'll start partnering with Reed and staff on that contract amendment and all that documentation. From a product features perspective, I want to take just a moment. As I mentioned last meeting, there's going to be some nice enhancements with GoalMaker. So we'll have more information to share on this as we get closer to migration. But GoalMaker is going to be enhanced where, first and foremost, it's still going to be based on age and risk. There's no additional cost. Participants can come in and out of it whenever they so choose. But we're going to enhance it where you'll be able to, in the future, stay in your assigned GoalMaker portfolio all the way through your career. So today in GoalMaker, if you, for example, are GoalMaker, your risk tolerance is moderate, and you're 26 years or more from retirement, you're in that version of GoalMaker. And then when you get closer to retirement, you would then move to the next step of GoalMaker, the next step of GoalMaker. The way that it's going to work at Empower is more intuitive from a target date fund philosophy, where, for example, that 26 plus version of GoalMaker today, it would look like, for example, moderate GoalMaker 2055, for example. And then you would stay in that version of GoalMaker as you continue in your career, and then that portfolio that you're in just gets more conservative as you go on. So I think that that's something that we've received feedback on over the years from participants and plan sponsors, and I think intuitively it'll be something that participants will grasp that concept a lot better. The other big change that's going to occur with GoalMaker is today, every quarter when we rebalance GoalMaker, that's done across the entire plan. And that creates a lot of work for us, for Jeff and his team, and also our partners at Bank of New York Mellon, because that is a huge trade that we're doing one day each quarter. So that kicks off a lot of work with forecasting and then getting in touch with all of the underlying money managers to let them know what to prepare for that large trade. All of that's going to go away post-migration because the GoalMaker rebalance is going to be done individually at the participant level, not the plan level, and tied to a participant's birthday. And that's also delivering on some of the feedback that we've gotten over the years with that tool. So I think all of that existing forecasting work will all go away because it'll just be done naturally in the day-to-day activity at the participant.
Mike, if I may. So a question, it's a huge plan. So when those rebalances are done, has it created problems for the separate account managers in terms of cash and everything, trying to raise enough cash to do it? I would think that would be a nightmare as a money manager.
It is, and so if you don't mind, I'll take that. So as Mike mentioned, one of the things that we do in advance of that trade is we try to forecast. So we forecast what we expect that trade to be, and we communicate that to each of the money managers. As you can imagine, during this volatile time, there's times when we go and say, you can expect to receive $10 million. And then when the trade actually happens, we're pulling away 5 million from them. And so they're going, what's up?
It happens to be a day when the market is down 1,000 points.
Yeah. And so we've had that happen where we tell them to expect money, but then we're pulling money away, or we tell them that we're going to be pulling money away, and then they get an inflow. And so it has caused problems. So we're really looking forward to this, because it really should just smooth out the flows, and we really shouldn't see those large trade events.
Because we've also forced them into selling a lot of times when it might not be a good idea. But if our trades are that big, the money managers may be moving the market with the big trade that they're selling or buying.
It could be.
Right.
If I could jump in.
Well, thank you.
I mean, it is an issue occasionally. Yeah. I mean, the managers know it's coming. They know when it's happening, and we try to give them heads up. But yeah, occasionally volatility of the markets leads it to shift pretty dramatically. Typically, it's a pretty small percentage of the portfolio that they manage.
Okay.
So they're certainly aware of it, and it can become an issue depending on how large the flow is and how volatile the market has been. But, we also combine the goal maker rebalance with the white label rebalance as well. So that's kind of a combination of the two. Sometimes they offset each other, sometimes they don't. But this will definitely help. It won't eliminate the white label rebalance that we still have to do. So there still will be a rebalance done at the white label level. But for the goal maker piece, it'll reduce it dramatically. So this will definitely help. But
okay.
So when the money manager gets the new fund, or they are asked to liquidate, is it immediately, or is it over a period of time where they get to manage that process? Because if you have to buy it immediately, then you are subject to that current price as opposed to planned introduction or exit in the market.
so the cash flows happen on a certain day.
A certain day. But do they have to invest immediately?
No, they do that as they see fit, essentially, right? If they know it's coming, and generally they do typically have cash in their portfolio anyways. They'll carry 2 to 5% cash anyway. So hopefully it's not more than that 5% that they already have if they need to give money. If they're getting money, it's just a matter of, okay, we know we're going to get some, we can invest
Over some period of time.
we can invest over time, or invest some of the cash we already have, anticipating getting more in. So they manage that process over time, but that cash flow happens on a specific day where they either get money pulled from the account or money deposited into the account.
And again, that's why we send them the forecast, so that if there is an outflow that is forecasted, they do have several days to look at what they're holding and kind of manage that process better. But still, it's really only basically a week.
And then last comment is also all participants are going to get a really nice enhanced digital platform. So today in the Heritage Prudential environment that everyone is still on, we have an app, but there's really only about 4 things that you can do on that app. The rest of all the transactional history has to be done on the website. When we get over to Empower, everything that you can do on the website, you'll also be able to do on the app. So it's going to be a really nice big technology shift for participants. Also, it's going to have enhanced Spanish capabilities. So with one click, you can change the entire app or website over to Spanish. And then if you want to, you can also then at that same time give us the indication that you would like your statements and all your confirmations also in Spanish too. That's going to be a really nice update. Same thing as well. Today a lot of things are done in batch processing where you have to wait for a nightly cycle to be done in order to see what you did on your account. Once we get to Empower, it'll be real time. So like if you call the call center or do something online, you'll be able in real time to just see what you requested there in your account. And then also at no additional charge, enhanced Saturday hours. Currently today, we don't have Saturday hours. Once we get over to Empower, we're also going to have call center hours available on Saturday. It's just one additional free service to participants. So we're in the process right now of starting to build the detailed migration plan. As I mentioned earlier, we're really going to leverage a lot of the learnings of what we learned through the 403B discontinuance project in terms of how we need to reach out to all of the employers and really guide them through this process. So we'll continue to share with Jeff and his team how we're coming through this project plan and have a good, meaningful update for you again at the next board meeting. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Matt to highlight some of the great enrollment activity and participant activity from the last quarter. Thanks, Mike.
Good morning, Treasurer Fall, members of the board, members of staff. Great to be with you today. As Mike mentioned, if you look back, and I'll go through some information, and in a minute, we'll start with slide 50. Just 2022 in general, just a phenomenal year. We made a lot of progress within this program. When you look at all the special initiatives we had, campaign activity, some of the headwinds that are out there, but the progress we made that I'll walk through, I think was really strong. We had around 69,000 engagements with employees last year, over 3,400 employer meetings. So when you look at those combined, over 70,000 live engagements. These are our group meetings, our one-on-one employer meetings, and also the retiree courtesy call campaign that we have going on throughout the year. So really good engagements levels that I'll walk through. Even just last week, folks need us. I heard a story about a retiree that we reached out to as a part of our courtesy call campaign. This person had just entered retirement, was very pleased with this program and the support they were offered, but they were in the middle of working with an advisor to move their assets out of their 401k plan to an individual product with this broker. The counselor spent some time with them and just encouraged them, please, please, please check with that individual to understand the fees, the implications, any tax implications. Fortunately, this person called that advisor back, asked some more questions, called back to the counselor on our team and said, you know what, I've changed my mind. I actually realized some things that I didn't understand. Thank you for encouraging me to reach out. It's just one of many stories. So folks need us out there. And when you look at the information on slide 50, we can see a lot of activity we had last year. I'm going to start with October 2022, top left of the page. When we were together in December, we talked about the National Retirement Security campaign that happened in October. Many thanks to Tom, to Jeff, and Cecil were out there, Christy, entire staff. We had a phenomenal October campaign. We had 9,500 total engagements during the month. So we look at all the promotions that happened, special events, the initiatives, a very successful October again, which we've seen over the last few years. And that momentum really carries into November and December when we have large campaigns like that. You can see the roll-up of Q4 at the top there, 17,278 engagements. When you combine that with the other 3 quarters for the year, you'll see the roll-up at the bottom right of page 50, 68,997 total engagements last year. In each of those different metrics, group meetings, one-on-ones, employer meetings, we were higher than we were the year prior. We were 10% higher on group meetings. We had 1,888 group meetings last year. 45,583 group meeting attendees. That's 25% higher than the year prior. 25,414 one-on-ones, 7% higher, and 3,481 employer meetings. That's 14% higher at the same time in 2020. All in all, I think really strong engagements. But the engagements are just part of getting folks to take action to improve their readiness. On slide 51, you will see a breakdown of those enrollment actions by employees. And to Mike's point earlier, 2021 was a very strong year. We set record levels of actions we saw with employees, and we beat that record again last year in 2022 with 26,243 folks enrolled in this program. Not only was that 12% higher than the year prior, that was the largest year ever for enrollments. So really strong engagements, really strong actions. And we're also seeing actions with employers as well. On slides 52 through 58, you'll see a breakdown of the different employers who have taken actions. Our team is working with employees to provide the education. We also work with employers to add plans. We had 27 employers add a 457 or a 401k last year. another 39 either enhance and match program, contribution program, or add a new one. These are really, really strong levels. And then we have a number of employers that add some of the other optional features like contribution accelerator. They're moving from dollar-based contributions to percentage-based contributions. And with those employers that make those decisions, we're there to help them. Kelly Martindale, I think I've shared some stories from Kelly's region in the past. She's our longest tenured counselor. She's been with the NC program for 25 years now. She had a county in November that rolled out an enhanced match program, added contribution accelerator, moved to percents, also had some other benefit changes. She worked with them over a 3-day period to host 12 group meetings. We had over 300 county employees come to those meetings. We were in person, did a number of one-on-ones with those same employees. We had dozens of people enroll. We had hundreds of people either increase their contribution or make non-financial changes to their account with the counselor there on site. Those events, those types of meetings are happening every day. So we saw really good engagements. We saw really strong actions with employers and employees. And then we also are seeing that momentum continuing into this year. Like mentioned, we spent some time with staff yesterday and walked through January results. We had over 5,000 engagements in January and almost 2,200 enrollments in the month of January. So we're seeing the momentum continue from 21 into 22 and now even in 23. So really pleased with the results last year and the energy and excitement we have coming into this year. A couple other quick updates with special initiatives. We wrapped up our discontinuation efforts last year with the 403B. Right now, we're actually spending time with those same employers, 115 K-12 employers out there, to really go deeper at a building level. So we have over 3,000 principals across the state. We're reaching out to them one by one, just to make sure they understand this program, that we're here to support them, really to get champions within their building, to advocate, to help us connect with folks to provide education. That'll continue for the next few months. We're also doing our employer webinars every quarter. We also do monthly sessions with new employer contacts, HR, payroll individuals, to train them on using the website. We're actually getting ready here in the next couple months to drop a couple new videos to train employers on some specific topics. And then, of course, our retiree outreach efforts, our courtesy call campaign, and then the webinars that we offer. Just yesterday, we did our monthly roadmap to retirement sessions that we offered to near-now retirees. We had over 800 folks register for that webinar yesterday. So just phenomenal results, I think, when we look back at last year with this board, staff, and the program overall. Thank you for your leadership, for your support. Thank you to staff for your partnership. Excited about what we achieved last year, but there's a lot of work to do, and looking forward to the rest of this year. Any questions?
So I'm just, I think my question is trying to understand how impactful those learning sessions are. So in the numbers that you have, do you know how many are like people who attended multiple meetings or wanted more learning and those kind of things?
Yeah, I'd say if you look at it from a unique participant or a unique employee standpoint, what we find is a lot of folks that attend our larger group events, either locally, regionally, or statewide, they then will set up a one-on-one consultation for more support at an individual level. So when you look at the data in our meetings, we see a pretty big spike after large meetings. I'll use yesterday's meeting, the roadmap to retirement. Typically, we'll find a lot of folks that attend those meetings will actually go and set up an individual appointment with somebody like a Kelly Martindale to do an individual consultation where they're more comfortable interacting maybe at a personal level. So that's pretty common. I'll be honest, I haven't looked at the duplication across all of our group meetings. With 1,800, I'm sure there are some people that go to a local meeting and then may attend a statewide, but we also offer a variety of topics. The roadmap to retirement is just one. We also do sessions in partnership with Tanya's team. Her team will do the pension side, we'll do the supplemental side. That's a different meeting. We do sessions where we're training people on how to use the website. That's a very popular session where we'll go through the web and mobile app, how to use it. So, we expect to see some duplication across those meetings because the content's different.
We hope to see, right? The one-offs, they're not beneficial for them, for the individual. Want multiple interactions, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we do new employee orientation sessions, but then we'll do kind of accumulation phase sessions just to get into some of the general topics out there to educate people. So But, you know, be more than happy, we could take a look at some of the data.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I know that, from my experiences, if somebody just looks at one, chances are they didn't really get it.
Yeah.
So then it's not helpful in their selection process. So
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Other questions? Do you have something on your mind?
Not right now. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I just want to say to Bob and then Steve, since the other two aren't here personally, if y'all wanted to have more space, you can feel free to move down and it's totally up to you.
I want to be closer to you, Mr. Chairman.
Since I'm coughing and you're coughing, that's why I said that. I thought maybe they will move down COVID. Good. Thank you.
Oh, that doesn't help at all. That did not help at all.
When is moving down?
I've had a chronic cough for 15 years, so that was not.
Me too. Welcome.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing BNY Mellon to present today. This is my first time meeting you all. So I'm Cooper, and I'm a director within business relationship management at BNY Mellon. I oversee the state of North Carolina relationship. I'm going to provide a brief corporate update. I'm going to do a little bit of a relationship overview, and then I'm going to really focus on BNY Mellon's cybersecurity program and policies. It's a really interesting topic that's topical with a lot of firms this past couple of years. I do welcome you to stop me along the way with questions. So 2022 was a great year for BNY Mellon, but it was an interesting one by the numbers. Typically, a custodian will measure itself by measure its success by its gains and assets. In 2022, our assets under custody and administration decreased by 46.7 trillion at the end of Q4 2021 to 44.3 trillion at the end of Q4 2022. Similarly, our assets under management decreased from 2.4 trillion to 1.8 trillion during that time as well. So that's a 5.4% and 25% decrease respectively. So again, how can you really measure that as success? Well, what's important about those numbers is really the disparate difference in those drops. So our assets under custody decreased at a much smaller rate than the assets under management. Those assets under management were more typical of what occurred in the market, whereas our decrease in assets under custody actually was a much smaller decrease. So what does that mean? Why is that important to you? It means that BNY Mellon is winning business. It means that we're doing a really, really great job to further capitalize our strong business. And for any, plan administrator, plan sponsor out there, that's really important. I think Treasurer Falwell said it well earlier when he said that, the participants of the 403B plan, 401k plan, they're not paying much attention to who's securing those assets, but a plan administrator or plan sponsor would. And BNY Mellon is the safest custodian in the industry. If you don't mind flipping a few slides, you'll actually see our, right there, our credit ratings. We're actually the highest credit rated custodian bank in the industry. And again, the fact that over a time when, the majority of the competitors out there were actually, losing assets at a rate similar with that of the market, we were actually gaining assets. So it's an interesting year for BNY Mellon. We think that our success was really based on the focus on our technology. So we doubled down on our automation and AI efforts, leveraging technology throughout our core custody operations. That was welcome news to a lot of our clients that thought that maybe we needed to double down on our core custody operations, things like proxy, tax reclaim, class actions, core custody trade settlements itself. So that's really where BNY Mellon focused in 2022, leveraging technology, and it worked out well for us. It's been a lot of positive news about BNY Mellon, the journey that it's on. I'll pause there for any questions before I move on to the asset servicing overview.
Continue.
So I think by and large, you know who BNY Mellon is and what we do. We're a custodian bank. We safekeep the assets of the SRP. But really, safekeeping is just a component of what we do. There's much more to custody than that. We settle tens of thousands of cash and securities transactions per year for SRP. We have a network of global custodians around the world. We offer settlement in 100 different markets. We monitor the market for corporate actions events, make sure we vote about those corporate actions in accordance with how your investment manager's elected. And then we probably most critical, we ensure that the income that's due from those events comes in and is allocated appropriately and timely so that folks can reinvest it. Beyond that, we provide complex unitized accounting for the SRP portfolio. We're systematically ensuring that the earnings flow properly from the investment pool up to the plan accounts. That's all done within a single integrated system. We work with Empower to receive daily record keeper files for the participant activity. We leverage a tool called the Smart Allocator tool to automatically rebalance assets within the underlying investment pool. That accounting data that flows to performance and provides critical performance reporting for Jeff and for Chris. We provide foreign exchange as needed, cash management of uninvested daily cash. We have a large staff of professionals that oversee the SRP portfolio. These are individuals that have been with the bank for decades. That really make it a point to understand who SRP is, how they operate. When you're dealing with a complex unitized plan like that, I think that's really critical. Like years of experience is really important. Talking a little bit about 2022 and the relationship specifically with SRP, some of the things that we accomplished. By and large, it was a what I would call a BAU year. That's that slide right there. I would say it was a BAU year, a business as usual year, and that's a good thing. We focused on getting it right and solid execution. We also took the opportunity to amend the custody agreement that's in place with BNY Mellon in a few different areas. First thing we did was align the contracting period with that of the retirement system contract, the veterans contract. It allowed for the investment, this is at the request of SRP, allowed for the investment of China A-share securities through what's called the Hong Kong Connect model. It's a way of investing in the China A-share market without actually opening up an account directly in that market. It's a lot of complex process to do so. And then we enhanced provisions within the agreement to ensure that BNY Mellon notifies DST within 24 hours in the very unlikely event of a data breach. It was ambiguous before. So those were a few of the custody agreement amendments that we made. We worked with SRP for additional rollouts and usage of our Smart Allocator tool. And we've begun working with SRP on our tool called Instruction Capture. Instruction Capture is an online tool that allows a client to initiate cash transfers or cash wires out of the bank online versus having to sign a manual, manual instruction and faxing it over. So it's really making the process more efficient. In BNY Mellon news, we had some personnel changes in 2022, namely myself taking over as relationship manager. We also had a change in CEO. So Todd Gibbons has retired and has handed over the reins to our new CEO, Robin Vince. And then as I noted earlier, we've continued doubling down on technology and strategic alliances. So BNY Mellon was the first custodian in the industry to basically open up its system architecture to third-party firms so we can integrate our systems and our client data with those third-party firms that the clients might use. We have, I think it's 26 strategic alliances today. And in 2022, we added 3 more, and that's with FRT, which is a class action service provider, Proximity, which is a proxy service provider, and then Acceptor, which is a tax services or tax reclaims service provider. All right, again, I'm going to pause there before I move on to the cybersecurity points. No? All right, so I want to preface this section by saying that BNY Mellon is a GSIFI, a global systematically important financial institution, meaning that we're an organization deemed too big to fail by regulators in the federal government. And as such, we have required to have some of the most stringent cybersecurity, data security policies in basically around the world. So as such, every single employee at BNY Mellon is required to take cybersecurity awareness training, which covers everything from passwords to device security to remediating cyber events if they ever did occur. We're actually tested on this regularly, whether directly or indirectly. So directly, we participate in mandatory trainings. Indirectly, our business information securities officer will send out phishing tests to employees. So on any given day, if I get an email that I think looks fishy, I need to click the fish button. If I don't, I'm marked as having failed. Habitual offenders actually get tracked, and they either have to take further training or risk being terminated. So that's how seriously BNY Mellon takes cybersecurity. We put such an emphasis on it because the numbers have skyrocketed since really the onset of the pandemic. So overall cyber events have increased 480% since 2019. And more specifically, spear phishing, which I'm going to talk about in a second, has increased 1,200% since 2020, since the onset of the pandemic. The way we combat this, so BNY Mellon actually participates in cyber war gaming. So, I provided Jeff with a whole bunch of slides. It's going to be good, bedtime read for anybody who wants to fall asleep. So peruse it at your convenience. But you'll see that we participate in just dozens of industry forums and whatnot. But we participate in cyber war gaming. With actually, I think it's very interesting, with our very own competitors, JP Morgan State Street. We'll participate in cyber war gaming with them. We have constant communications links with them where we're sharing information on real-time security events to make sure that, if they try to get hacked, they're alerting us and vice versa. So we participate in industry exercises. We have a CTOC, you see on the screen, that's a Cyber Technology Operations Center. It's a command center in our Greenwich Street office in New York City. It's a room probably a little larger than this, where every square inch of the walls is covered by screens. It's almost kind of like a NASA command center. And to give you an idea of what they're monitoring on a daily or annual basis, we have 5 trillion cash and securities transactions flow through CTOC on an annual basis. It's 5 trillion cash and securities transactions. In addition to that, they're monitoring emails as well. So BNY Mellon sends and receives 100 million emails in a given month. 100 emails in a month, 100 million emails in a month. Of those 100 million, about 600,000 are what we would call cyber risk related emails. We're not talking just spam, we're talking detonatable emails. So our CTOC center in our Greenwich office will monitor those emails. 99.97 never make it through our defenses. Of the 0.03 that do, they get remediated right away. BNY Mellon had zero priority 1 cyber events in 2022. And we have a $3 billion budget per year that supports all this. So again, that's how seriously we take cybersecurity. The landscape has changed in recent years on who we're dealing with. We're not really just dealing with the common cyber criminal hacking from his basement anymore. We're dealing with nation state actors. We're dealing with hacktivists who are trying to weaken, banking or America's infrastructure. It's really interesting stuff. Where I see the biggest risk to SRP is going back to the cyber criminals, though. They've become more sophisticated, and I want to give you a real life example. So again, I mentioned how spear phishing has increased 1,200% since the onset of the pandemic. And the example I'm about to share is one that was successful for the fraudster, but that clients have become keen to in BNY Mellon's helping to head these off. So there was an instance in 2020 when I'm going to use the term fraudster. A fraudster hacked into a client's email somehow. I don't know how. It's beyond my pay grade. A fraudster hacked into a client's email, but then sat patiently for 4 months and watched the email activity go back and forth. So this wasn't someone just putting a phishing email out there trying to get rich very quickly. This was a very patient, deliberate attempt to watch emails. They noticed that on the 4th Tuesday of every single month, an investment manager would send an invoice to that client, and usually that investment manager would say, "Hey, great game for the Capitals last night," referring to the local hockey team in the DC area. After 4 months, the fraudster decided to initiate their plan. They knew that the investment manager invoice would usually be sent around 11 a.m. So at about 7 a.m., they initiated an email from a spoofed email address that looked very, very similar to the normal sender, and said, "Here's your invoice for the month. Great game by the Nationals," referring to the baseball team. "If you could pay this as early as possible, that'd be great. We'd appreciate it." The person who received it, knowing the banter with this investment manager, didn't think anything of it and sent $100,000 out the door to this investment manager. It wasn't until 11 a.m. when that other email showed up where she said, "Uh-oh, something's wrong." So having looked back on it, it was pretty easily trackable that, okay, you know what, there was an L missing in you know, the email address. So BNY Mellon was able to help get back 98,000 of that $100,000. You know, we have processes that we act through quickly, but it caused me, you know, relationship manager was notified. It caused me to kind of look into our process a little bit further. And this is something that happens all the time across our entire client base. So while this happens in the client shop, and it's something that I ask you to be hyper vigilant about, don't sit on it. BNY Mellon has ways where we can help out and help claw that money back as quickly as possible. So again, that's called spear phishing. Spear phishing is a very deliberate attempt. And it's something, again, we started 1,200% increase.
Hey, Matt, can I ask a quick question? So was that a situation where the wire instructions had changed and they sent it to a different wire?
You know, Chris, that's a great point. That's a critical point that I had written down. So the fraudster basically mirrored an email that the person normally would send, but also had access to the PDF invoice that was sent as well. So they created essentially a mirror of that PDF invoice as well. The only thing that they changed was the ABA number and the routing number. So what happened was the funds went from, let's say normally they would go to Bank of America. Instead, they went to a bank in Georgia. As soon as they hit the bank in Georgia, they were directed to go out to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Fortunately, there were policies in place where, you know, you can't transfer $100,000 out of a bank account the moment it comes in. You know, you have to, you know, you're able to transfer out 2,000 and the rest has to wait. But that's exactly what they did, Chris, is they changed the wire instructions, and the woman who processed it just didn't think anything of it. She thought, you know, this is I'm expecting to get the investment management invoice today. I'm just going to go ahead and process it.
Yeah, we typically on our side, just for folks to know, if there's any change in wire instructions from what we had previously sent regarding any sort of invoice, we have double checks in place to make sure with the investment manager or the entity that's receiving that, the vendor, that the wire instructions did indeed change. So we do try to make sure that.
I just want to add, I serve as treasurer of an organization, and as soon as the treasurer changed to me, I started getting these emails asking me to approve a transaction. Of course, I'm a retired accountant. No way. I need documentation. What's I going to do?
I think the obvious of why it was a 1,200% increase during the pandemic is because, you know, folks were out of their normal environment. They were perhaps out of their normal control environment, though they should not have been. And I think maybe perhaps people got a little bit lazy during that time and weren't you know, checking as much as they should. But Chris, I may have even told this story before. Forgive me if I did, but I tell it to anybody who will listen because I think it's a reminder that how sophisticated these type of events are. You know. Just going back to the CTOC, the Cyber Technology Operations Command Center that we have in our Greenwich Street office. This is a facility that I'd like to offer up just an open invitation to board members or to Jeff or Chris. If you're ever in New York City and want to take a tour of it, it's really just a phenomenal, it's a sight to behold. It's almost humbling in a way, very hushed environment, literally hundreds of thousands of transactions flowing through. You'll see the screen light up if there's a cyber event. It's really a sight to behold. So open invitation for anybody who does want a tour. We can arrange that.
How are you gonna tell us where it is? That's great. How are you gonna tell us where it is?
Get in without me escorting you.
Not JSOC, which is down here in North Carolina, but TSOC.
CTOC, BNY Mellon Cyber Technology Operations Command.
What's ours called down here?
Joint Special
Operations Command. JSOC.
So that's really all I had prepared. I tried to keep it brief today. Any other questions?
I've got one. I'm just curious with the sort of the digitization and tokenization of things evolving more and more in all kinds of assets. How do you see that as a custodian for a lot of different things? How do you see that playing out, or do you see that having a big impact on not just the SRP, but otherwise?
It's a great question, and I can tell you this. So on, I want to say it was October 13th, BNY Mellon announced that it was the first custodian bank in the industry to be able to support digital assets. Okay. So if you have, and by digital assets, we're really starting with Bitcoin and Ethereum. If you had Bitcoin and Ethereum, we can now custody those assets. Okay, so we basically record those on our books, on our accounting records, so they show up as part of your plan. And then we keep that currency, that digital currency, with a third-party custodian. It's all integrated in our system. So that was kind of a big launch point. But we purposely moving very, very, very slowly. So that was limited to a total of $100 million in digital currency. And it's really to see how things go. I think that the future absolutely is tokenization and digitization. But I think that it's going to be slow going, especially when you have things like, I'm completely blanking out on the name of them. FTX. Thank you, FTX. When you have things like that cause people to pull back and say, wait a second, before we move too fast, let's fully understand how this would have impacted, you know how it impacts the issuer of the currency, but how does it then impact the depositories that they trade through or the custodians that hold it. So again, long-winded way of saying it's going in that direction, but it's going to be slow going.
Other questions or concerns? Okay.
Mind if I use this brief inside my organization? It's one of the best cybersecurity briefs.
Oh, please do.
I've seen.
Yeah, by all means, please do.
Just we've seen the same percentage increase in attacks that you've seen.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that keeps me up at night.
It's incredible. The things that come across my own desk. I don't even process cash and securities transactions, but the things that come across my desk are scary. So, yeah.
Thank you.
One question for you. The audit committee started addressing the problems of cybersecurity, and all I can say is your presentation has given me 100% improvement in confidence about our ability to protect our people. Thank you.
Two quick things. I was speaking at a conference recently and parked on the curb, walked in, did what I did, and then left. Is it possible that somebody can get something off a credit card by walking through a building and make a charge?
Yes,
Fortunately, yes.
Need something like this?
Yeah.
That has this.
RFID.
Oh, wow.
We could take a far detour here, but real quick.
Where were people?
The
It was
security,
important to us.
security thing that you walked through when you enter the building, you had the metal detectors.
That was just for you.
Except for the common folk, the metal detector, folks who aren't the metal detectors.
We're gonna take that down. We're just trying to press you.
There's actually, there's been an increase in instances where usually right at about hip level, people will place these metal cards right on the side. It's a data information gathering device. So as you walk through, it's pulling the information from your, if you have one of those chips on your credit cards, it's pulling the information off the chips and those devices.
And lastly, there was an insert in the Wall Street Journal sometime in the last 2 weeks with a big red face on it about cybersecurity and things. I don't know if you happen to see that or not. Okay. Maybe some other folks here saw it, but I was interested in your opinion about whether you thought that was a helpful 2 or 3 pages to read regarding this topic or not. So.
Yeah, no, I didn't read it, but I would say any reading on this topic, if you can do it, it's not the most exciting topic, but if you can, it's worth reading.
All right, thank you. Make sure that will protect her when you leave. All right, now we're on to Paul.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good morning, Mr. Treasurer, board members, staff, and guests. Thank you for allowing me to present today. And I guess if we pull up our presentation, starting on, I believe it's page 2 of our presentation, but 133. All right. So the with who we are page, see, basically left-hand column, as at the end of the year, assets, page back, please, the second page there. There you go. Assets under management, 92 billion at the end of the year, roughly flat for the year. They're about 92.1 billion at the beginning of the year. Stable value assets, as you see on the page, did move from 74.4 billion to 75.7 billion. This was mainly due to participant flows. If we break down that 92 billion, as shown on the page there, 75.7 billion is in our stable value assets, which represents about 82% of our total. The remaining 18% or 16.3 billion represent our standalone high quality fixed income mandates, which are mainly in the short to intermediate duration ranges. 75 plus stable value separate accounts, which the state of North Carolina is a part of. 100 employees on staff, and which has remained roughly at that 100 employee level over the past few years. Middle column, 200 plus institutional clients. 89% of them have been with us for at least 5 years, and 72 of them have worked with us for over 15 years. State of North Carolina is approaching that 15-year mark. They've been with us since December 1st, 2010, so roughly 12 years. And as I always like to take this opportunity to thank you for your continued faith in Galliard. On the right-hand column, real quickly, we continue to be one of the largest managers of stable value assets and have focused exclusively on stable value and fixed income investments for 27 years. Average senior personnel tenure with Galliard is over 22 years. And any questions on this page? Okay, if we, yep.
Mr. Treasurer, nothing says thank you quite like a reduction in basis points.
Well, I will approach that as we get further down the message here, but always, yes, taking a look at some of the numbers that we've done, and probably since 2015 we've brought down fees 30-40%. So, but I still have some more ideas on that, which we could talk to staff offline.
I just thought I'd say that before some other board member said it, so go ahead.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. My pleasure to help. Okay, if we turn to the next page, it's our org chart. Don't want to go too much through this, just really want to highlight one recent announcement that pertains to this page. Was sent via email to staff over the last week, and it's basically naming Galliard's new Chief Compliance Officer as Paul Felsch. He joins Galliard from Edward Jones, where he was most recently served as the Chief Compliance Officer and Anti-Money Laundering Officer for their 190 billion plus proprietary mutual fund complex. In addition to his role as Galliard's CCO, Paul will also be the CCO for the funds management group of our parent company, Allspring Global Investments. And really, as a separate legal entity and registered investment advisor, Galliard is required to name a CCO. So there are a number of named CCOs throughout Allspring for their various business units, and all of these CCOs report up ultimately to Allspring CCO. And really, Paul will assume the CCO role from Brian Renault, and he's listed in that legal compliance lower right-hand part of the page. And Brian will remain at Galliard through the transition, and will be leaving the firm at the end of February. And Brian's been with us for the last 3 years, and we thank him for his service to Galliard over that time. Any questions on that change?
Proceed.
Okay. If we turn to page 4 under section 2, I added this chart this quarter, and just I wanted to put into perspective, the extraordinary movement in interest rates, mainly on the short end of the yield curve. And I wanted to provide a graphic that shows just how much yields have climbed over the last year or so when looking at the Fed funds rate. And this is the interest rate at which depository institutions like banks and credit unions lend their reserve balances to other depository institutions overnight on an uncollateralized basis. And also the 3-year constant maturity treasury, which is the main benchmark for the stable value fund. And it's compared to the Galliard's separate account stable value blended yield, or also known as the crediting rate. And this is a net of fee number. And although this shows Gallagher's composite just above 2% at the end of the year, the state of North Carolina's stable value fund has a higher net of fees blended yield at 2.2%. And really, with these historic raises in fixed income returns have been negatively impacted by in terms of total return with the raise in interest rates. So we see that the returns for the Bloomberg US aggregate and the Bloomberg intermediate aggregate indices had their worst annual return on record at negative 13% and negative 9.5% respectively as of December 31st, 22. And with this increase in yields, the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund has been able to invest at these higher yields now, which are over 5% noted at the end of the year. So as I've mentioned in my previous meetings, the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund's crediting rate will move higher, all else being equal, like no significant participant outflows, as it does follow the interest rate movements that are shown on this page. But they do that with a lag due to the book value smoothing of returns, which incorporate both the amortization of the market to book deficit, which is under 100% now, and it includes this reinvestment at the higher yields and maturities, which I mentioned are over 5% right now. This U shape that we see for the crediting rates will also be shown in the following pages as I speak to the previous 9 historical quarters of statistics. So any questions on this page? Okay, if we move on to page 5 under section 2 here, we see the metrics of the North Carolina Stable Value Fund at the end of the year. And again, the portfolios continue to provide consistent and expected statistics, even in the volatile markets we are experiencing. Left-hand column, we see the assets as of the end of the year. We're roughly about 2.46 billion and have increased roughly 10 million since last quarter. If we break down that 10 million, 3.5 million were actually negative outflows, but this was offset by the increase in income, about 13.4 million in interest earnings. So if we look in the lower left hand of the page, portfolio characteristics as of last quarter and this quarter, we could see book value wrap financial strength ratings are still strong at A+. Same can be said of the underlying quality of the bonds that make up the stable value fund have remained at AA. Number of contract issuers did not change, remained at 5. That net blended yield, as I mentioned, or crediting rate has gone up 26 basis points from 1.94 to 2.2%, and will keep following the path of interest rates upward, all else being equal. And again, this is mainly due to that reinvestment at the higher yields, which have increased over the quarter from 4.92 to 5.03%. Put that 5.03 yield to maturity in perspective, it's still higher than a comparable 91-day T-bill or a 3-month T-bill and the 3-year constant maturity treasury yields, which had yields at the end of the year of 4.42% and 4.22% as of the end of the year. Duration has remained near that 3.3, 3.4 year range or quarter to quarter. If we look at that market to book, it has improved over the quarter, and this was mainly due to the positive underlying fixed income performance and the ongoing amortization of that market to book deficit. We don't have concerns with that market to book at 92.87%, as this is solely due to the Fed raising rates on the short end of the curve and not a credit deterioration event, which we had seen in the great financial crisis of 08. We have seen the market to book decrease in all of our stable value separate accounts over the first 3 quarters of 22, and that has been expected. While market yields have risen during 22, the effect of the underlying bond portfolios has been negative. So interest rates rise, bond prices fall, which we'll see in the market value performance of the underlying bonds that make up the stable value fund. So again, really, rather than the benefits of stable value are twofold. So rather than recognizing when interest rates go up really fast, rather than recognizing the underlying market value of the bonds going negative, the stable values investment contracts are designed to amortize declines in that market value and protect investors from the volatility that a bond fund might experience due to changes in interest rates. So because the contracts, the wrap contracts, smooth the return profile of these underlying bonds, the yield or the crediting rate in this matter earned by stable value investors tends to generally track the current market rates with a lag. So as a result, in these rising rate environments, stable value investors gain the benefit of reinvesting at these higher rates, which I mentioned are at over 5% now. So if we look at historical data, we can see that stable value crediting rates have tracked changes in market rates, but on a lag basis. We believe this to hold true going forward. So really, stable value is designed, to have that market book drop below 100% in a rising environment. This is by design and fully expected in a normal interest rate cycle. Any questions on the market book ratio? Okay. Column on the right there. Oh, I'm sorry, real quick on that previous page. Just the column on the right there. Assets have been growing consistently over the past few years. Portfolio distribution below shows that the portfolio remains consistent in its underlying allocations with that small liquidity buffer that handles daily participant flows. And it really just demonstrates that the portfolio remains fully invested in the fixed income market. Page 6, the next page. This page shows what the participants' net of fee performance was as of December 31st, 22. We do continue to see strong, steady, consistent long-term performance, basically the 3, 5, 10, and 12-year, that inception period, in providing relative outperformance that we've been able to provide plan participants. Net of all fee performance over the last 3 months and 1 year did underperform the 3-year constant maturity treasury benchmark. And again, this is expected as the benchmark reacted to those increase in 3-year treasury yields immediately, while the stable value fund reacts with a lag, as I mentioned, to that smoothing of the book value returns. But if we look at even longer time frames, the 3, 5, 10, net of fee returns, we provided outperformance of 70, 47, and 71 basis points respectively, net of fees. Inception returns are even stronger at that 12-year period at over 100 basis points of outperformance. So really, message on this page: very strong relative long-term performance provided by the underlying investments. A stable value is acted as it should, providing principal preservation in the volatile markets. So, one thing to keep in mind, if we do see, the proposed raises in Fed rates, the two or three more of 25 basis points, we should expect to see the stable value fund to lag that benchmark. But, as it gets to that terminal rate, we should see things possibly changing as that lag, catches up. If we turn to the next page.
Well, I'll just say, this is Lorraine. I would not want to be in your shoes. Now, you have got to be having this conversation everywhere. So I appreciate what you're doing and the efforts, because, there's just no way for you not to be lagging right now. I would really be worried, honestly, if we were looking at this and we're not lagging.
Yeah.
With what's going on, I would wonder what's going on. So appreciate what you're doing.
No, and it's a great point to make. But what we like to look at is how the stable value returns look over time. And again, over longer periods, the stable value will outpace the 3-year CMT and the 91-day T-bill, for example. It's just that the extraordinary Fed intervention that we've seen over the last year and a half, it really is unprecedented. And to have yields that we're investing in at 5%, that's really going to help boost that credit rate going forward and ultimately the performance. Okay, if there are no other questions,
Steve Dean has a question.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Follow up on the comment Ray made. We have seen the last year probably the greatest magnitude of increase in interest rates in 40 years, with what we're going from 0 to 5, basically. We haven't seen it in the North Carolina portfolio, but across the stable value portfolio, have you seen significant redemptions by others that might take 2% money and put it in 5% 1-year treasuries, for example. If they were to do that, the plan can't do it as a whole, but have you seen any significant change in behavior the last 3 or 4 months that shows some outflows because of this rapid change?
Yeah, well, I guess if we turn to the next page real quick, that'll show the kind of flows for the stable value fund. But in general, your comment about are you seeing participants move out of stable value and into a short-term bond vehicle, and really the wrap contract providers really don't allow this, and so because that's an arbitrage thing there. So really what they institute, it's called a 90-day equity wash. So if a participant wanted to go into one of these short-term vehicles like a 1-year treasury or a T-bill or a money market fund, they would have to park their money in an equity vehicle or some other non-short-term cash or bond vehicle for 90 days or 3 months before they can move it in there. So the wrap providers provide that protection, so there isn't that arbitrage opportunity. That being said, from what we've seen previously, we haven't noticed a lot of participants doing that. I mean, that was a worry, in the early 2000s and periods like that. But specifically with stable value in general, we saw inflows on the most part, modest inflows for the first half of 22, and we've seen modest outflows in 22. I don't think that participants are really feeling like now's the time to get out of stable value and flock into equities, because we do still hear that the Fed is considering raising interest rates, and GDP slowing down, and the macro or the world environment too, where there's geopolitical strife. So to answer your question about have we seen people move money from stable value to a money market fund, usually plans only offer one or the other in general, but if they do have both, they have that 90-day equity wash provision. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, so really on this page, don't want to spend too much time on, just basically, as I mentioned, historical cash flows. Over the fourth quarter, we saw inflows in October and December and outflows in November. Pretty small net outflow of 3.5 million during the fourth quarter. Really, these figures here don't appear to be much different from our other stable value separate accounts, as participants have generally moved their assets, out of stable value very modestly in the second half of the year. So if we turn to the next page, page 8, this kind of shows the historical portfolio characteristics over the last 9 quarters. And again, in that upper left-hand page, this was, the U shape I was talking about earlier about the Fed funds rate chart. But what we do, we see that U shape, and we would expect this number to continue to rise as it follows the movement in interest rates, again, albeit with a lag due to the smoothing of the underlying market value bond portfolio performance. It appears that, we've gone through that flattening stage that we saw from the third and fourth quarters of 21 and the first quarter of 22, and now rising up to 2.2% in the fourth quarter here. And again, keeping in mind that we will also need to take into consideration the amortization and the market value losses within the underlying fixed income portfolios, that market to book under 100% moving back up to 100%. But this has been offset to some extent, or even by more extent, by that reinvesting at the higher yields at 5%. Historical duration, bottom left-hand corner, pretty consistent between 3.25 and 3.4 years. Upper right hand of the page, one thing we did see in the fourth quarter is that market to book did rebound. And generally that was because we had positive returns in the fixed income space over the fourth quarter. Again, we're not concerned with the sub 100% market to book ratio, as I explained earlier, because that is exactly what we expect stable value to do, and that's to smooth those underlying fixed income losses over time, instead of realizing those losses immediately, as an investor would in a market value based fixed income portfolio. We see the yields there, climbing, and again, that's solely due to the Fed intervention. So exactly what we would expect. Page 9, the next page. Okay, this is basically the book value wrapper allocations. Again, remain consistent over the past quarter. Same investment strength, financial strength ratings. Again, we've seen fees coming down, and we guess that 15 basis points is the floor right now, as none of our 10 approved wrap providers has gone below this. One last item to note on this page is that we will be switching from the Metropolitan Life separate account, GIC, noted with that contract type, that SAGIC. And that's going to be moving to Met Tower, which is a subsidiary of Met Life. And that will be moving to a synthetic GIC or an SBIC, just like the other 4 wrap contract providers. The Met Tower synthetic GIC will be replaced roughly within the first half of this year, and it carries the same financial strength ratings of AA- as MetLife does, and we'll have a fee moving from 17 basis points down to 15 basis points, again in line with the 4 other wrap contracts. The big thing to note here is that this change will not impact the day-to-day operations of the Stable Value Fund, and it will include no impact to daily trading by plan participants. Any questions with that change? And just to add, we're doing that across our book of business as well. So it's not specific to the state of North Carolina. So if we flip ahead to page 13, so it's a few pages up, it's the wonderful fee page. So, one thing that we've noticed is, year to date, fees have dropped roughly 2 basis points, or 6.1%. But if we omit that administrative fee offset for record keeping expenses, that did go down from 2.7 to 1.4 basis points. We did see the fee dropping like roughly a half a basis point from the beginning of the year. Quarter to quarter, the fee remained at 27.5 basis points. And the main source of this reduction for the year was the Galliard management fee decreasing from January 1st. 22 to a most favored nation client fee. So that was the number there. I took a look at what fees had been basically back from 2018. They dropped probably 21%, and from 2015 they dropped nearly 50% from those levels. So one thing that I do want to bring to the board's attention is that we were successful in negotiating with one of the external managers, Prudential, and that this fee would be in that non-affiliated investment advisor fee line. And beginning at the beginning of 23, which will show up in the next report, we did get fee savings of roughly $10,000 per year. And it does move the Prudential fee roughly down a half a basis point. There are things that we could consider that I'll speak to staff with about lowering these fees, and it might be considering the mix of the underlying external managers that we have in place that run about 50% of the portfolio. Whether that 50% number is something the state would like to continue with, or, because our common stable values separate account, we run external management. If there's a want to have external management, that number is roughly around 30%. So we could talk and discuss, if there's a thought there, or even move it if there's a thought to stay at 50%, maybe consider a change in the mix of managers. But we can speak about that in the future meetings. Any questions on fees here? Okay. Page 15. Really quick, right there. Rolled up total portfolio statistics, and again, on that left column there, it shows the 50% of the fund is managed externally by 5 managers outside of Galliard. High level message also on positioning. we are positioned a little bit more conservatively, but are still actively looking for relative value in spread sectors. And when I mean spread sectors, I mean anything non-treasury. And we're, in such as corporates, agency mortgage-backed securities, or asset-backed securities, as we have trimmed the allocations to U.S. Treasuries over the year. We do continue to find select opportunities in these spread sectors. Our view on corporates remains neutral, and that's kind of moved down from being attractive because we've seen that there are pockets of value with financials modestly cheap versus industrials. But our approach, again, will remain measured and balanced, focusing on curve trades and trimming the tighter names while adding opportunistically when we see values. But we see valuations kind of getting at that fair value range. If we turn to page 14, we see the underlying market value performance. I think it's the next page there. I'm sorry. There you go. And so, as I mentioned, we did see returns for fixed income go positive this quarter. Finally, what we saw in the fourth quarter, yields continue to move up and down. Bond markets were influenced by inflation and the Fed actions. The start of fourth quarter saw a continued rise in interest rates, driven primarily by an upside surprise in inflation and payroll reports. The Fed did hike the rates an additional 75 basis points in November, but then laid the groundwork for smaller hikes going forward. And these more dovish comments fueled a rally across rates and credit markets, which was extended when November's CPI, or Consumer Price Index, that inflation number, came in better than expected. So we did see fixed income rally in the fourth quarter. In terms of the performance of the underlying portfolios that make up the stable value fund, as I mentioned, we finally got to see positive quarterly performance in fixed income in 22, and all outperformed their benchmarks with a modest underperformance in TCW. Really, what really grew the outperformance in the fourth quarter was overweight allocations to corporates, agency residential mortgage-backed securities. Commercial mortgage-backed securities also drove outperformance, as credit spreads did generally tighten. A general overweight to the middle part of the yield curve also proved beneficial. And security selection within the corporate space, which we've found a lot of value in most of 22, was mixed among the managers. And detracting from returns on a general basis was security selection and agency residential mortgage-backed securities, along with allocations to asset-backed securities and taxable municipals. So really, the high-level commentary on the metric drivers that drove performance in the fourth quarter. One last item I'd like to mention about one of the external managers, and that's Jennison, which I brought up last quarter, where we put Jennison on watch list because Ty Laurie, who is the co-chief investment officer of fixed income, he left the firm in September of 22. Well, since our last meeting, Galliard's external manager oversight team did visit Jennison in their Boston office on November 17th. Galliard spoke with both Tom Wolf and Jake Gall regarding the departure, along with the other members of Jennison's fixed income team. And the Jennison's team was fully transparent regarding the departure and their long-term plans for adding resources to the structured products team. So really important from that meeting we got to date, Jennison has not experienced any client losses as a result of this departure, and there has not been any employee turnover at the firm. Jennison does maintain an experienced investment team, and we believe they're fully capable of providing consistency in their investment philosophy, style, and process. And as such, we don't anticipate this departure will materially impact or change how the portfolios that are managed for our clients, especially the state of North Carolina, are managed. Jennison does remain on Galliard's list of recommended managers, although we will continue to monitor them closely and we'll keep clients apprised of any material changes should they arise. So with that, those are my comments. Are there any questions for anything that I've gone through?
Comments or questions? No, thank you very much.
Okay, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking with the board and next quarter, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you again.
Elizabeth and Weston. Generally, how long is your presentation? I wanted to see if I board needs a little break or not.
Go as quickly as you would like to. 15 minutes.
What would the
There's
board
two
like?
pieces to it.
Yeah, there. Yeah, maybe.
Board like to take a little break? Or we good? Okay, all right.
I'm good.
All right, we will, in the spirit of the full agenda here, and we'll keep it brief. One thing that we put in front of you is this periodic table of investment returns. We put this on fancy card stock once a year. The story behind it is Jay Klepper, the head of our capital markets group, came to join Callan in the late 90s. And back then, it was all about tech stocks. And, everywhere we were going, it's, hey, we don't need diversification, we need more tech. And so Jay wanted to put something together on a single page that showed the benefits of diversification and the difficulty of picking next year's winner. So he put this together. You've seen this in the industry, they're ubiquitous, but this one's the only one with a little copyright on the bottom right hand. So just a little bit of irony here. Benefits of diversification, really, as you see it in 2022, there was nowhere to hide. There wasn't really much of a risk reduction or a benefit to diversification in 2022. This is actually, this covers 20 years, but if you rewound this and looked at this giant 100-year table, you would only see 3 years where U.S. equities and U.S. bonds were down in the same year. So 2022 was a pretty interesting year in that regard, where both stocks and bonds were down. This is also one for the history books, in that Paul alluded to it earlier, just the challenging environment for fixed income. This is by far the worst year in the history of the Barclays or Bloomberg Aggregate Index. It used to be Lehman, that used to be Shearson Lehman. So going back to the history, the worst year on record prior to this year was to the tune of -2%. And you see U.S. fixed income down -13.01. So
we've had worse periods, but not worse years.
Yes, that's right. Worse periods, but not worse calendar years. And even in the 70s, when interest rates spiked up so much, you had a yield cushion to start with. Here, what made it so bad is there was no yield to start with, so that when interest rates started rising, those market losses went straight to the bottom line. Just a couple of other interesting things that happened during the year, and we'll see this in our report in a minute, but the performance gap between, we did want to highlight some diversification benefit here, but performance gap between large cap value and large cap growth was around 22%. So large cap value outperformed large cap growth by 22% in 2023. The theme here is that, as we talked about fixed income and interest rates going up, fixed income got repriced, and that there was a theme for 2023, so did everything else. So that was the whole nowhere to hide. If we had a crystal ball at the end of 2022 and said, sorry, I'm getting my ears, at the end of 2021, and said, all right, we think inflation's going to spike to 6.5%. And we got that call right. Well, where should we invest? How about tips and real estate? Those are inflation sensitive asset classes. Well, we would have gotten the call right on inflation, but we would have gotten the call wrong on the asset classes to be in. Real estate, you see at the very bottom at -25.1, and then tips, which I don't show on here, was also down 11.8%. So it's just a little over what we saw for the high yield markets. The dollar strength was a theme in 2022. So you see that in the non-US equity returns, non-US equity or emerging markets. The dollar strength was a headwind as you translated that back into US returns. And those are the broader themes for 2022. So thinking about that and performance as we go through, we'll very briefly touch on this
flash report showing January performance because there are some highlights specifically as it relates to managers and the performance of your underlying or your options with the participants, the multi-manager white label funds. But I will just mention that January here on page 1 was a good month, about a $775 million increase from the month before, from year end, with 800 million of that coming from investment gains. So we are clawing some of those losses from 2022 back. Some of it came in the fourth quarter, some of it came in the first part of this month. I'll jump forward 3 pages to page 4 and just highlight for everyone, we know that 1 month does not make a trend, but we do want to have our eye on a little bit more forward looking as it relates to some of your manager performance. So as you go through and look at year end and how the various options did for the year, just keep in mind what has happened, transpired so far in 2023. In January, this fixed income fund, about 0.5% better than the index here in January alone, which is a big move for fixed income traditionally and really for a white label fund. Then you go down to large cap core equity. These are all your managers rolled up. 2.9% better than the index in the first month of 2023. And a lot of that coming from 2 managers that have struggled versus their index, so Sands Capital as well as Loomis. So good to see. And we mentioned it before, both those managers are concentrated managers, so they can exhibit some wild swings relative to their index. And so it's good to see that swing going back in the other way here in the very near. Small and mid cap equity behind the index. We don't think there's anything to read into there. A lot of that coming from Brown, which is a higher quality manager in January. Some of those lower quality names rebounded. And then international equity, again, this has been a more challenging space for Bailey Gifford, but Mondrian and Bailey Gifford outperformed here in January. So with that, I'm going to jump into the bigger report and trying to keep to my 15 minutes here. I will go through this because as it relates to actions, we don't believe there are any here before the board today. I will mention on page 5, just going through the investment fund balances. We'll skip all the market commentary. We got provided some for 2022 that helps caption performance here. But on page 5, the total value of the assets at 13.8 billion, 13.9 billion. That is an $825 million increase from last quarter, 831 million coming in investment gains. So what happened throughout all of 2022, there was about $2 billion lost. And so over the last quarter and a month, so over the last 4 months, about 1.6 billion of that has come back. So good to see. Moving on to page 6, this is the performance that the participant tends to see, or it will see. This is high level. These are the options that they choose from, so they don't see the underlying managers unless they really dig in and try to understand that. But as you look at the top, tier 2, the passive funds, these are in line with expectations. A little tracking error for that fixed income passive, and if you saw what happened in January, a lot of that was to do with pricing. So that has washed out. So if we were looking at it over time, it would be very much in line with this index. I mentioned TIPS had struggled in the earlier comments. You all use a shorter duration TIPS vehicle, the 1 to 10 years, so that's not the broad TIPS. That actually was a benefit. You see that in the rankings versus peer versus all of that mutual fund peer group of TIPS. So that explains that. Moving down to stable value, fixed income, large cap core, international. These are the various options the participants can choose from. I will just highlight that over the last quarter, all funds, all the options meet their indices for the quarter. We don't really have a great index and really returns for stable values shouldn't count. How you should measure them is crediting rate and market book, and both of those are above median for the stable value fund. But as you look through fixed income, large cap core, international equity, and small and mid cap equity, all these beat their indices. And then over the last year, it's almost the opposite message, is that for 3 of these, 2022 was a very unkind year for the fixed income fund, large cap core, international equity as well. As you look at the longer term results here in the 5 and 7 years, better reading, save for the international equity fund. And you'll recall that we did make some structural changes to that fund a little over a year ago. And, we think that those will play out over time and should add some outperformance here going forward. I'll jump to page 12 and we will come back to performance potentially if there are other questions. But on page 12, we show what we call our stoplight report. This is our Callan Global Manager Research weighing in and providing some input on the various, not just performance, short-term and long-term performance, but the people, the process, philosophy, the things that drive performance. And then highlighting, all right, what do we find good, in line with expectations? What do we find notable? What do we find cautionary? And then, the dreaded under review. So the good news is I think has changed to an under review status, but I will point out where maybe there are some new items to note. Here for Loomis sales, large cap growth, they did announce in the fourth quarter that there were some voluntary separation program. So a couple of analysts were allowed to leave as part of that. And so we marked it as blue. That's new. It's notable. Not something that we think you need to take action on. As it relates to the short and long-term performance, actually Loomis's more quality growth style has begun to come back in favor. So in fourth quarter, you would note much better performance, but also here in January, they performed well also. So, no action recommended there on Loomis. The one that we have spoken about a little bit in more detail here is Sands Capital. One of the requests from last quarter was to increase the reporting on Sands, and we just, for the board's benefit, we have, been in touch with staff, and we have had a number of conversations in our quarterly meetings with staff, more detailed, and we will do our best to put a little bit more reporting in here for this executive summary. But just would mention those comments before about how performance has begun to improve. They have a way to go before they can dig themselves out of the hole that was created in 2022. The new and more cautionary item here you'll see under people. We marked this yellow because to the right you see Mike Schrammick. He was on medical leave. We expected him to return here in 2023. Ultimately, he decided to leave the firm. He was one of 4 portfolio managers. There is not an intention to replace his role. He had more. He was the lead portfolio manager for their 5, 10, and 15 concentrated. So a portfolio that holds 5 stocks or 15 stocks. He was still a very important part of this. One of the 4 named portfolio managers. But that is something that we're watching and paying closer attention to. One of the other things when a portfolio manager underperforms, a lot of times you pay attention to flows. Are other clients taking money away, or are other institutional investors taking money away? Ironically, in 2022, it was the opposite. Sands has been closed window that when they experienced this underperformance, they actually allowed for clients to reinvest assets, and they actually gained net new inflows over 2022. So it is not the situation that we would expect, where people are leaving and taking their money with them. It is actually people are doubling down and leaving, and people And then finally, I'll just mention wedge. This is also a topic of conversation with staff, and just there are no changes here, but we are continually monitoring performance. And also, this is one where the flows I mentioned for sands were kind, opposite for wedge, where the flows have been a little bit more unkind. They have not lost a lot of assets in this strategy, the SMID strategy. Where they have lost more assets are in the underlying mid cap value as well as the small cap value on the fundamental side. So one of the metrics that our management research team are really paying attention to is this, the 30% of their total assets under management are in that fundamental equity platform. To the extent that it gets a whole lot lower, we worry about viability of the strategies going forward. So nothing that we think you all need to act upon today, but those are the metrics that we're paying attention to. That is the brief high-level overview. I'm happy to touch on performance, attribution, but we do have another presentation coming up that talks more about the investment menu design and probably more worthy of your time and attention today.
Questions? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. We will now move forward to the investment design review, which we also call investment structure evaluation. So what we're looking at here, and this is the next section after the performance review. That's next. Yeah. Several pages ahead. It's the next section. It's a new tab. But what we're talking about here is that we're effectively looking at what options are available to participants. So how many options, what types of options. And so that's what we mean when we talk about structure. As part of our regular fiduciary process, we recommend looking at this every 3 years. We certainly reserve the right to do that more often if there is a need. I can assure you today, this regular process, we're being proactive. We're looking for opportunities to see, is there something that we can move upon? The short answer is no. The plan is very well structured. But to get to that conclusion, we take a look at participants. So who is it that we're serving here in this plan? What do they look like? How are they using the investment menu? So that gives us some insight into whether things are working well or whether we have an opportunity there to help them make better decisions. We'll look at the current structure of the plan versus peers to get a better sense of what are others doing. Does that tell us anything? It's not a benchmark. We don't need to look like peers. But is there something that we can take away from there? And also importantly, as you talk to your constituents, if someone says, hey, other people are doing this, you can say, yep, we're aware of that. We've talked about it. Here's why we made this decision. And then lastly, we'll take a look at whether there are any opportunities to improve. In looking at the structure today and going through that process I just mentioned, what we have found is the plan is serving participants well. They have enough choice, but not too much choice, right? So they can diversify their portfolios, but they're not overwhelmed by the number of options that are in there. They have a blend of active and passive opportunities. They're using the menu well. So we feel like the plan's in really, really good shape. As we reviewed this with our defined contribution committee, which consists of senior consultants across the organization, we really struggled to find anything to change. We do think over time, if you have an interest in further streamlining, there's an opportunity to do that. We can blend large and small into a single US option. That's something to think about. Certainly no need to do it now. Some other plans are discussing it. We're not seeing a lot of people further streamlining. But again, that's something that we might put on the table. But we don't have any recommendations today to make any changes. So I want to give you a little bit of information again into how we came to that conclusion. As is typical, we give you a lot of information so that as fiduciaries you're informed and we've documented good process. I'm going to hit the highlights. Half of this deck is in an appendix just for reference. We've heard the phrase over the last few hours of if you get tired and you can't sleep, there's an appendix in here, more information for you. Starting on page 2, and a big thanks to the Empower team for getting us a lot of information to dig deeper into how participants are, into demographics and also how they're allocating. We'll just start here with a summary of the plan. So we've broken this out into, we're looking at on the top half, those white shaded bars, we're looking there by asset dollars, and the bottom light green shaded, we're looking at the number of participants. So not surprisingly, the majority of the assets, the majority of the participants are in the 401k plan. 457 plan also large, so we do look at both, but the majority are in the 401k plan. And we wanted to look at goal makers. That's the QDIA, the default investment alternative. So anyone who comes into the plan and does not actively make a choice is defaulted into goal maker. So that's, everything's important, but that's definitely an important consideration. We want to see how participants are choosing versus how goal makers choosing for them as well. So we broke that out. You'll see by dollars, it's about half. Half the participant dollars are being allocated through goal maker. Half of the participant dollars are being done in a do-it-myself kind of a fashion. When we look at the number of participants, you'll see it's a strong majority of participants are allocating through goal maker. And when we look at the demographics, that'll make a little bit more sense why that's the case. On the next page, page 3, this looks at the breakdown. So what do the participants look like broken out by age? So the blue bars are the participants by number. The orange bars are their assets. You'll see by participants, it's pretty evenly distributed. We don't have a huge spike in one age bracket versus the other, but if you add them up, the majority of assets, or the majority of participants rather, are 55 or more. Not surprising, or sorry, 50% are over 50. And then the majority of the assets are with those that are over 55. So not surprising. The older demographic have been working longer, they've saved more, they have bigger balances than those that are just starting out. On page 4, it's a pretty similar demographic, pretty similar breakdown on the 457 plan, just a little bit more of a spike on that older end. Moving ahead to page 5. Look at menu utilization, and we'll start with the 401k plan. So here we're taking each age demographic and looking at the percentage that are invested through goal maker versus do it themselves. So this isn't surprising. The newer employees, the newer generation are more likely to default into whatever's given to them versus those that have been around longer who either started by doing it themselves and changed, or maybe have other assets and for various reasons they're older, they think they can do better, so they're doing it more themselves. But you'll see for the younger folks, the majority are in goal maker, and then that declines as the participants get older. Similar story on page 6. So we'll move to page 7. So we know who the participants are. How do we think about we want to help them help themselves, but the goal here really is to help participants make good decisions. We know that they're all different. They have different risk needs, different risk tolerances, return needs, outside assets. We want to help them make good decisions for wherever they are in their life and whatever their investment needs are. So over time, we've learned a lot. I think when I started my career, we really focused on just getting good investment options in there, right? So which funds are performing well, let's put a bunch of them in there. And over time, we've learned a lot about how participants are using their 401k plan, how they're making decisions. So we've become a lot more sophisticated in structuring these options. So instead of just putting it out there, we're really helping them and empowering them to make good decisions. So this really drives, when we talk about a good design, it's driven by these things that we've learned. So inertia. Participants typically will stay put. So those folks that are not making a decision, that are being defaulted into goal maker, are probably not going to go into their account and move very much. So we need to keep that in mind. For the ones that do make decisions, they tend to chase things. So we call it momentum. That sounds nicer. But what we don't want to do, I was going to grab the periodic table. We don't want people to take whatever color. We don't want them to look at this and say, okay, well, here's the best performing asset class. I'm going to put all my money in there. It's going to go down there. Even though we always say buy low, sell high, people do the opposite. They go in and say, what's the best? That's got the best return. I'm going to load up there. So we know that that happens, and we want to find ways to protect them from that. That's part of why you all have the white label options. You have growth and value together, so people don't try to chase back and forth. That would have hurt them in the last 2 years. Influence, The number of options can influence people to make decisions in a different way, and then choice. Everybody says they want more choice. We want more, we want more. But there's a lot of evidence that shows if you give people too many decisions, they become paralyzed and they either won't make a decision or a bad decision. So this is really, again, there's the investment performance, but at the heart of it, when we think about designing a plan, these are the kinds of things that we think about to say what's good, what's optimal, how are we helping them? It's to help them make good decisions, knowing that these 4 things really drive a lot of participant behavior. Page 8 is just a summary. We've gone through this before, but effectively in the menu design, there are 3 different types of options. Tier 1 is the asset allocation. For you all, this is goal maker. This is the do it for me, the participant who just wants it to be handled. They don't want to have to touch it and make decisions. So goal maker handles the asset allocation decision for them. Then there's tier 2. This is the do it myself. So we need to give them the core building blocks to build their own portfolio. So again, everyone has a different risk and return tolerance. So we need to help them build something that suits them. Or if they have other assets outside that they want to think about, giving them those building blocks. So those are those tier 2. And then tier 3 is specialty. So this is things like a brokerage window. For corporations, it could be stock. So those are just extra things that for various reasons come in there. On page 9, we've mapped out the SRP plan options in this same format. This is pretty similar. The review that Weston just went into, we always break it down this way. So the takeaways here are we have a full menu with tier 1 and tier 2. The plan is very streamlined. We don't have any tier 3. There are no specialty options, anything additional that doesn't fit those main criteria. Within tier 2, you offer all the main building blocks. All the major asset classes are represented here. And you have what we call an active passive mirror. So you're giving participants choice between active and passive in every major asset class. One exception there is in the inflation sensitive, we just have passive. Tend to not see as many dollars flowing there, and so passive makes more sense. We don't think we need to add an active option there. The passive is really fitting the bill. So where we are, again, thorough, you have enough choice, you've got all the building blocks, but not overwhelming them with a bunch of extra options that might be confusing. Page 10 just shows how participants have elected to allocate their own capital. So we show you these numbers every quarter. Here we've broken it out between those that are allocated by goal maker and those that participants have allocated themselves, just to give you a better sense of what's underneath those numbers that we show you each quarter. No huge takeaways here. We do have larger balances in stable value for the non-goal maker participants. Think about the demographic we looked at. The dollars, we have a large amount of dollars in the older age demographic that tend to be a little bit more conservative. They're in or near retirement, so more likely to opt for stable value. Participants making their own decisions are allocating pretty equally between active and passive and large cap and international. And then we have lower balances in the inflation protected options, which is not uncommon versus what we see with other plans. Quick look at participant demographics, and I will speed this up. So when we look at participants on page 12, we're using 2 sources of information. One is our defined contribution survey that we do every year, and the other is our DC index. So both of these are a large number of plans rolling up information from them to help us make informed decisions. In the interest of time, I'm just going to tell you a couple things without flipping pages. You are in good company in terms of active versus passive allocations. About 90% of plans offer both active and passive. A third of them offer the full passive mirror, like you all do. So very close. The average number of options is about 14. You all have 11, so it's a little bit lower. I would argue that's good. You don't have, again, company stock, brokerage window, things that are confusing. I think streamline is good, and 11 is a solid balance there. You're offering all the major asset classes that your peers are. Participant allocations are pretty similar. Kind of page number, sorry, Patty, throwing you off here a little bit. But maybe if we could move ahead to page 20. Just a quick look at how participants are, we call the holding patterns on page 20. I know some of you have it on your iPads. But in terms of allocations in terms of number of options for Goalmaker versus the DIY participants. You can see here on the top left, did want to explain this because it looks a little bit confusing how somebody could have no assets allocated with options. Those are effectively people unwinding from Goalmaker. So they're in the process of redeeming, but it still shows up. So Goalmaker allocates between 5 to 11 options, but participants are really using across the board all of the different building blocks. So again, what you're giving them, they're using, and it's pretty effective. There's a couple more pages on how participants are allocating. I'll let you all look at that at leisure. And we'll go back to page 24, or sorry, ahead to page 24 to wrap up. So again, thinking about the broad distribution of participants that we're serving here, the plan is working really, really well. It's simple, but also elegant. There's a lot of diversification, but it's behind the scenes where it's not confusing participants. They have a range of choices between passive and active. So the different philosophies of different participants are served by both. So we really don't see anything glaringly wrong. There's certainly nothing wrong with the plan, and there aren't any changes that we can see today that would better improve outcomes for participants. Again, I think keeping on the radar, maybe further streamlining over time, something to think about, something that we'll continue to watch and consider. But today, the plan's in great shape and serving participants well. So again, this is important to look at on a periodic basis. We want to make sure that we are giving participants those tools to build what they need for their retirements. And the good news today, a lot of times we come in and have changes, but we don't want to change just for the sake of change. We think that the current status quo is serving participants well. Happy to answer questions and try to speed it up a little bit.
Any questions?
Question. Okay, I thought this was a really interesting report, and I delved into it pretty deeply. And the only question I came up with was, if we ultimately decided to combine the equities, large, small, medium, together, how much would we save in managerial fees doing that? Any idea at all?
You're making it all cap.
The fees would actually be the same. So the short answer is they'd be the same because we would effectively take the small, mid, and the large, put them together.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some rebalancing. We'd have to go back and look. We would equal, well, they're already maybe a little bit more to small cap if it's under. But effectively, the management fees would be pretty similar. There would not be a dramatic change. If we were to go down that road, we would go back and holistically say, okay, is this, now that we're looking at this holistically, is this the right number of equity options within small and mid and putting them together? So it's possible it could change, but I don't think fee savings would be a factor in that decision. It really is more of a menu design decision.
So I guess another way to say that is it would only change at the white label level, not at the manager level. So you wouldn't get rid of some managers and hire an all cap manager and reduce the number of managers.
Yes.
I mean, no, that's what we'd look at, right? If that was where we wanted to go.
And we would revisit.
So potentially there could be savings, but yeah, if you kept the managers the same, then yeah, likely there wouldn't be really any savings, but you could potentially have an all cap manager or reduce the number of managers, which would affect management fees. Not necessarily saying it would be one way or the other, right? It would have an effect on it. I guess it depends on which direction you would go.
Okay, thank you.
At the margin, not dramatic.
Yeah, okay.
Other questions? You don't have to answer this right now, but there is something in elections called ballot fatigue, where people just get down the menu and don't know anything about anybody. Is there any statistics in your world where people see this buffet of things where they just, it's either eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or I should know something about that. I should be smart enough to know something about that. And so they just choose one.
Yes.
There's
a lot of evidence to support that. And so what you're talking about is the reason we talk about a streamlined menu. So again, back in the day, it was not uncommon to see plans with 30 options, and participants could not make heads or tails of that. They'd get tired, they'd make a bad decision, or just put it away and end up sitting in cash. So yes, that does happen in the investment world too, and we're very sensitive to that.
I don't mean to geek out here, but there's something called the JAM study that you may have heard of, you may not. Sheena Iyengar is the behavioral economist. She went into like Whole Foods and she put 3 different jams out and, got fewer people coming up to look at, well, what do you have? But more people went and bought those jams. Then she put out a table of 24 different jams and a lot more people came up, but very few people bought. And so the design within 401ks, it actually has some implications. You put a menu up of 60 different funds, you're like, I can't choose. I don't want to choose. But if you put, I think we're getting to where we have enough evidence in the marketplace to 15 and below, that's where people are able to differentiate. Oh, you have a small cap fund. I want to do small cap. Oh, you have a large cap fund. I want to do. So they're a little bit more likely to make a choice the fewer options you have.
Okay. I was saying that kind of ties back to what the question I asked Matt earlier in terms of how often do they come back to learn more? Because I know there's even with if you had 10, people don't naturally know what those 10 options are, and one visit is not going to answer that question. So.
Good point. Anything else? At a subsequent meeting, there was many quarters ago, there was a very controversial decision about SMID, mid, active, passive. So at subsequent meeting, I'd like a debrief on how all that shook out for our members as far as performance.
This mid-cap mandate?
Yeah. It was a thing that went on for months and years. And
I think you may be referring to the international small cap.
No, just mid-cap.
Oh,
We eliminated options.
there was a split vote. I just like to look in the rearview mirror and see what happened. So, anything else? Did it? Thank you. All right, Christopher.
Yep, thank you. 2 minutes of your time. So in terms of the fourth quarter compliance reporting, we continue to monitor compliance on a daily basis with all of our divestment policies and prohibited holdings, with the executive order around Chinese military companies, as well as all of the investment guidelines within each individual investment manager to ensure that they're complying with what they agreed to. And for the fourth quarter, there were no material violations with any of these 3 items here. We continue to not hold any other prohibited holdings, whether it was the Chinese military companies or related to our divestment policies. And all of our investment managers continue to comply with the agreed upon investment guidelines.
Is that it?
That's all I got.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, just a couple of things. Public comment section. One second up. I did want to tell you, as I was walking out a moment ago, I met one of our customers who had just lost her husband last week, actually. 90 years old. Her name is Susan, and his name was Edmund, and worked for the state for 30-some years. Division of Employment Security, but he left right a couple of years before I got there in 13. And she wanted me to tell this board and this staff just one of the few, a week out from this, one of the few comforting things in her life is the way that she has been treated as she has tried to go through the mechanics of being a widow. And the importance that these plans were to her husband, and the comfort that he had in his last days of his life, knowing that she was going to be taken care of financially. And she asked her if she'd like to stay and say this herself. And any of you have been through the grief process, that was a little too much to ask a week out. But she did write me this note, and I just wanted to communicate that to you. So that's our public comment for the day. We'll go around the horn. Will staff have anything additional? Yes.
Okay. I'd like to share with y'all my thoughts about the fact that I've been sitting here too long. Even though I kept reminding the treasurer, you know, you need to stick it to the Senate and get things rolled up according to law.
Sitting here too long today, or?
Yeah, no. But I've been around long enough to learn a lot and form a lot of different opinions about a lot of different things. But the reality is something that I was told at the very beginning of my service by a young man who was serving, I think, as an intern. And he told me, he said, when I asked him, well, tell me about this. And he said, well, I'm a member of this system, but I need to tell you, it's the single most important government commission in the state of North Carolina. And I said, you're kidding. He said, no, I'm very, very honest about this. I said, why? And he said, because this commission has to take care of us. That's basically it. And from my perspective, having heard that from this young man who was like in his late 20s, what I have learned is that the single most important aspect of all of us as members of this commission is the fact that we accept totally the fact that we are fiduciaries. There are no other fiduciaries in the state of North Carolina in government, which means we're responsible not just for the nuts and bolts and the investment process and the administrative management, but we're responsible for their lives. And we have to think at a much higher level. That requires a lot of experience, and it also requires a lot of age, with age. And I think I'm the oldest person in this room because I'm going to be turning 75 next month.
You used to be 10 times older than I am.
Yeah, well,
now you're not.
And from my perspective, I think the biggest flaw in the way we are structured is the fact that we are term limited and we are political appointees. And I've seen a lot of turnover on this board. And from my experience, I know the first 2 years I was serving, it was hard for me to remember where the bathroom was, much less get a grasp on the extraordinary complexity of what it is we deal with. And the longer I've served, the more complex it's become. And especially with our cybersecurity obligations, the fact that we can be sued at the drop of a hat, it takes a particular type of person to be able to serve on this board effectively. And my recommendation is I think we need a statute change, and I think that we should not be limited to years, but we should only be limited to our own ability to serve as effective board members. And like the treasurer, the people decide whether he's going to be on it and how long. The House and the Senate, now supposed to be the Senate representative, the people decide who they're going to be. And then there's some turnover with the president pro tem and the Speaker of the House. But the governor's appointees, that's where I've seen the most turnover, and it has made, over the long term, the decision making sometimes has strung out for too long a time because of the very fact that there were a lot of new board members who would come in and then figure out they weren't ready for this type of responsibility. And that's the weakness of this board, is the lack of continuity and the lack ability to really establish a sense of teamwork among us. And my recommendation to this board is to recommend statute change and emphasize long-term service rather than turnover. We don't really need new thinking all the time, because that new thinking comes in and by the time the first year is over, they might understand what it is we're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jim or Nels, did you have anything as we go around the horn?
I just want to thank the thoughtful comments made by Melinda, and I appreciate all she does. And other than that, and I've enjoyed working with her. That's all I have, sir. Thank you, and thank you, board.
Okay, thank you.
And, Jim here. I would just echo Nels. And I'm a better performer. I'm a smart enough performer to know you don't follow the genius. So I have nothing else to say.
Put that on a business card. Is that compliant?
We're gonna call her husband and let you say that over again for the record.
Thank you.
Yeah. Steve?
I have no other comments. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, just like to briefly say is that the newest member and a person who usually sits on that side of the table, I really appreciate all the hard work that goes into the agenda and getting the materials to us. When you look at 289 pages of material, there's a lot of hard work that goes into that, both on the staff side and the folks who briefed us. So thank you very much. I've learned a lot by pouring over the material. So thanks.
And UNCG football still undefeated?
Still undefeated. And breaking even. Because most football teams don't.
Thank you.
Yeah, Melinda, thank you for saying that, because my first year, I felt so overwhelmed, like, but I like challenges, and so I try to participate where I can, but I have learned a lot, and I've met some great people, so I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
No comments.
Thank you all. Thank you for your comments. I was in this room for 9 hours yesterday, chairing 2 board meetings, and the F word came up a lot, and that word being fiduciary. And the State Health Plan Board and the Investment Advisory Committee Board. And my point of saying that to you is that there are a lot of finger pointing away from this building toward other boards who were not fulfilling their fiduciary responsibilities, especially on the healthcare side. So I think that this idea of fiduciary is something that we need to educate people on. That fiduciary to me means sort of like I means to Tom. I means I hear what you say, I understand what you've said, and I will do what I'm asked to do. And that's really what fiduciary means, that people understand what that word means, to have a loyalty and duty of care to their members. They hear it, they understand what that means, and that they will always act on that. And that's why I'm so comfortable with this board. It's not shocking to anybody in this room that people do call the corner offices and say, just put me on something. That's probably not shocking. I know it's not shocking to Nell. But this is not just something here. And all of you who are on this board are here for a specific reason, either your intuition, your heart, or your mind, or possibly all three at the same time. and your professional experience. So we appreciate your participation. Lastly, I just say, there's always room for improvement. There's always things that we can do better, but I'm very proud of not only this board, but also our staff as it relates to how cleanly these DC plans run in North Carolina. So hats off to all of you. We talked a moment briefly, we're not going to get into it, about proxies. There are lots of things going on in the proxy world, but all of our attention right now on proxies is focused on the defined benefit plan issues regarding proxies. And I'll just tell this board that whatever we learn along the way in that process, we will be sharing that with you going forward. We hire these folks to manage our money, not politicize our pension plan. Either way, on either side of the coin. And it just seems as I get older, I'm 65 this year, that the right and the left wing are connected to the same bird, and they just fly around together, I think. But they try to make people think that there's a lot of difference, but they're definitely dividing our country, and especially as it relates to issues about proxy voting. So we're just going to try to figure out what's right and lead and govern. So I appreciate all your comments and all your participation. And Steve, thank you for pointing out. I know you well enough to know how difficult that was, but I'm not surprised that you did, because it just happened to be about who's on the board. It could have been about any other contrast or contradiction that's in anything that we do. That's my observance of you on any topic. So I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We'll let the board do its work. We'll figure out what's right. We'll get it right and keep it right as it relates to coming back to you. We will not violate any meetings laws, but if Reed reaches out and starts, and as he's thinking about what this is going to look like when it comes back to us, and I appreciate you giving him your time to try to get to the right answer. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn in honor of this gentleman who is a public record. He's passed away. I thought it was Montague, but I don't think so. I'll let the genius. Can you be genius enough to figure that out? How to pronounce that?
Montague, Montaigne.
Yeah. So in honor of Edmund Montaigne, and I'd like to adjourn our meeting in his honor. So I hear a motion. Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. All right, got a second. Thank you.
Who's the second?
All right.
Jeff and Patty, and staff, thank you for all you did, and thank you for the vittles you brought in. Donuts are still back there and coffee, so if you need something on the way out. So with that, no further discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shabella Thomas.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Melinda Barron.
Aye.
Bob Shea.
Aye.
Nels Roseland.
Aye.
And Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye. Thank you all so much, and have a blessed spring.
It's summertime today.